Chapter 1986. Yi Wentao's eyes were filled with shock. He wanted to deny it, but when he looked up, he met Jun Juqing's gaze that was full of scrutiny, as if he had seen through everything. This made Yi Wentao's heart slowly turn cold. I really underestimated you. To be able to ask such a question, it was enough to show that Jun Juqing knew much more than he thought. He didn't see it at all before this. If he had known, he would have been on guard against him. Patriarch, you flatter me. I was just casually guessing. As for the truth, it's better for you to tell me personally. As Jun Juqing spoke, he directly sat down beside him. It seemed that if Yi Wentao didn't give him a satisfactory answer today, he wouldn't leave. Patriarch, you've done your best for family Yi for so many years, but in the end, you've fallen into such a situation. Even I feel sorry for you. Jun Juqing's words were like sharp blades, ruthlessly stabbing into Yi Wentao's heart. Just tell me what you want, and I'll get it for you. What do you think? Yi Wentao sneered in his heart. That was a nice way to put it. Jun Juqing was just doing it for himself. The room fell into a dead silence. Yi Wentao didn't say a word, and Jun Juqing didn't say anything either. The two of them faced each other silently. In the dark night, this kind of silence was almost suffocating. After an unknown period of time, Yi Wentao finally closed his eyes. She's holding the armillary shield. Jun Juqing looked up, and there seemed to be a glimmer in his eyes. Armillary shield. He had heard of all the famous divine weapons in the divine ruins, but he had never heard of this before. However, if it could make Yi Wentao go to such lengths, it must be an extremely precious item. According to Chu Luyue, Yi Wentao seemed to be doing it for Peach Blossom Cove, but in reality, he was after the armillary shield. If that's the case, then, what kind of existence was this armillary shield? How could it attract Yi Wentao more than the Peach Blossom Dock? I wonder what kind of treasure the armillary heaven's shield is for the patriarch to yearn for it so much. Jun Juqing asked. Yi Wentao suddenly laughed and turned to look at Jun Juqing. His scarlet eyes flickered with a bloodthirsty glimmer in the dark night, making people shudder. Then, his low and hoarse voice rang out in the room. I don't know about the rest, but once I have the armillary heaven's shield, I have a high chance of becoming a god. His voice was very low, as if it would disappear in the wind at any moment. However, Jun Juqing heard it clearly. His brows furrowed. There were beings of a higher level than Her Eminence. However, in the divine ruins world, it had already been 10,000 years since anyone had broken through this shackle. All the cultivators were trapped in the Her Eminence realm. No matter how hard they cultivated, they could not advance to the next level. But now, Yi Wentao actually said, with the armillary heaven shield, he could become a god. No wonder he cared so much. There were millions of cultivators in the world. Who didn't want to become stronger? It was even more so for a top god like Yi Wentao. He had seen too many things in the secular world, and he didn't care at all. The only thing that could make him crazy was this. If this news was known to others, it would probably cause a huge storm. But, who could be sure about this kind of thing? Could he just rely on a shield to cut the rope that had bound him for 10,000 years? Jun Juqing remained doubtful. But he didn't completely deny this possibility. There was no smoke without fire. Yi Wentao was willing to make such a big move, which proved that he had a certain basis. Otherwise, according to his cautious personality, he wouldn't act so rashly. Yi Wentao looked at Jun Juqing's changing expression and laughed softly. Ha, you say, who wouldn't want such a thing? Nan Yifan doesn't know about this. Jun Juqing interrupted him and said lightly. This was not a question, but a statement of certainty. Yi Wentao wasn't surprised that he could guess. After all, the series of events in the Nan family during this period was enough to explain everything. If Nan Yifan knew this, he wouldn't have taken such a risk. Then, the news about the Armillary Heaven Shield, did the Patriarch hear it from the Black Demon Cave? Jun Juqing suddenly thought of something. He raised his eyes and stared at him. Yi Wentao took a deep breath. That's right. That's strange. How could the one in the Black Demon Cave be willing to tell the Patriarch of the Black Demon Cave such important information? He seems to need this more, right? Jun Juqing asked with interest. You know a lot. Yi Wentao looked at him meaningfully, but he wasn't shocked. Ever since Jun Juqing asked that question, he knew that Jun Juqing knew a lot. Of course, I didn't get this news for free. I got it in exchange. Jun Juqing narrowed his eyes. The Patriarch is so capable to get such news. I wonder, what did you exchange for it? Yi Wentao sneered. How do you think he escaped from Rongxiu a few years ago? Peach Blossom Dock, Yu Mansion. There were a few peach trees in the courtyard. Under the peach trees, there was a green rattan chair. At this moment, a person was half lying on it. A breeze blew, and the pink and white peach blossoms fell, making the person's clothes look whiter than snow. His eyes were closed, and his facial features were clear and handsome. He was perfect. From afar, he looked as if the heavens had used the best jade to carve him. He didn't look like a human being. When Yuemo walked in, he saw such a scene. He had been with Rongxiu for many years, and he was already used to His Highness's peerless appearance. But when he looked at him again, a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. If Yan Qing was really gay, then he should like His Highness, right? Is there a man in this world who is more good-looking than His Highness? No, His Highness can no longer be described as good-looking. He's simply, just as Yuemo was letting his imagination run wild, Rongxiu opened his eyes. He looked over and happened to see Yuemo staring at him with a thoughtful expression, and the look in his eyes was even more. Rongxiu narrowed his eyes. Yuemo suddenly felt a chill. He finally came back to his senses and looked over. He met His Highness's eyes. He immediately shuddered. Hiss, so cold. His Highness's eyes are so scary. He originally wanted to run away, but his strong desire to live ultimately urged Yuemo forward. Your Highness, the matter you asked me to investigate has been found. Rongxiu sat up. Speak. Yuemo's expression was solemn as he bowed. Your guess is correct. A few years ago, there were indeed a portion of those who fought against you who were not from the Black Demon Cave. He paused for a moment, then continued. 3 of them were from Family Yi. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1987. These men are Yi Wentao's men of sacrifice, and they only obey him. Even many people in the family Yi don't know about their existence. Therefore, most people in the family Yi don't know about what happened back then. 3 men. Although it didn't sound like a lot, they were all very powerful. Otherwise, Rongxiu wouldn't have specially sent him to investigate this matter. In the years since then, Yi Wentao has been very cautious and hasn't summoned any of his men of sacrifice. That's why we haven't been able to find out that Family Yi is behind this. Until this time, when Yi Wentao was seriously injured and Jun Juqing took over the position of family head, he finally made a move. We followed the vine to the melon and found out about this. Although Yuemo was usually lively and liked to joke, he was very reliable when it came to serious matters. Rongxiu had handed this matter to him a few years ago. In between, he had tried countless methods, but to no avail. However, he didn't give up. When he found out that Family Yi had come to Peach Blossom Dock, he quickly sent more men to continue the investigation. Now, there was finally a result. Rongxiu nodded. His thin lips curled slightly, but there was no surprise in his eyes. He had indeed guessed this possibility long ago. At that time, he had chosen to go to Black Demon Cave only after he had a precise understanding of their strength. However, when he arrived, he found that the actual situation was somewhat different from what he had expected. Although it didn't have much of an impact on the final result, but Rongxiu had put this matter on his tab. In the world of divine ruins, there are very few people who have this ability. It wasn't hard to guess, but the key was to find evidence. Rongxiu smiled faintly. There seemed to be a thin layer of coldness between his brows. Yi Wentao was also a strong-willed man. Ever since then, he hadn't had the slightest contact with his men of sacrifice for such a long time. He had even cut off all contact with those who weren't sent to Black Demon Cave. It wasn't easy to nurture these people. The fact that he was willing to spend so much on them showed how tempting it was. Yi Wentao knew that Rongxiu would inevitably suspect him, so he had been very careful with his words and actions. If it wasn't for the fact that he was forced into a corner and had no other choice, he probably wouldn't have used this trump card. It seems that his life in Family Yi isn't too good. As Rongxiu spoke, he suddenly recalled how Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows and smiled. He couldn't help but smile. Speaking of which, I still have to thank you, for this matter. If she hadn't given Yi Wentao a few fierce medicine in succession and completely stunned him, things wouldn't have progressed so smoothly. Then, what do you mean? Let's just wait and see. Rongxiu lay back on the rattan chair and waved his hand casually, as if he did not care about these things at all. Ah. This. Umo was a little surprised. After all, this investigation had been going on for several years. He thought that His Highness would definitely counterattack after getting the evidence, let Family Yi deal with it themselves. Rongxiu said lightly. Jun Juqing and Yi Wentao, there was still a fight. Umo's eyes lit up. He immediately understood something. Your Highness is wise. Seeing that Rongxiu seemed to be planning to rest, Umo wanted to take his leave. However, he suddenly recalled Yan Qing's strange behavior and hesitated. Just say what you want to say. Rongxiu saw through his thoughts. Umo scratched his head in embarrassment. Your Highness, it's actually nothing. It's just that. I feel that Yan Qing has been acting a little strange recently. Did he suffer a blow during this period? Rongxiu's lips curved up into a light smile. Don't worry. That's what he deserves, Yi Zichen said. Digression, I'll be back at 6 mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1988. As soon as he finished speaking, a familiar sound of footsteps came from outside. Rongxiu's eyebrows moved slightly, and an exquisite and slender figure came into view. It was Chu Luiyue. Umo turned around and bowed. Greetings, Your Highness. Chu Luiyue had her head slightly lowered, as if thinking about something, but when she heard the voice, she looked up. Rongxiu had already gotten up and walked over. What are you thinking about? Why are you so lost in thought? As he spoke, he glanced at her hand and saw a faint red mark, as if something had pressed down hard on it. There was a trace of dark red blood that was about to seep out. He frowned slightly. What's wrong? Chu Luiyue came back to her senses and shook her head. It's nothing. It's just a small injury. To her, it was not even an injury. Rongxiu put his fingers on her wrist and checked it. After confirming that she had indeed only suffered a small flesh injury and was not seriously injured, his expression eased a little. But in the end, his heart still ached. He pulled Chu Luiyue to the rattan chair and let her sit down. He took out the medicine, gently applied it on her hand, and carefully massaged it. The faint smell of medicine was mixed with a trace of peach blossom fragrance. A cold feeling came from her hand, and the burning pain from before was instantly reduced by a lot. Chu Luiyue did not care about these injuries at first, but when she saw Rongxiu slightly lowering his head to apply medicine for her, she felt very relieved. She originally wanted to do it herself, but after thinking about it, she let Rongxiu do it. Your Highness, Your Highness, Your Highness, I will take my leave first. Yuemo was already used to this kind of scene. Rongxiu responded and let him go. Soon, only the two of them were left in the courtyard. Chu Luiyue tilted her head slightly and stared at Rongxiu for a while. His expression was very serious, and his movements were very gentle. In the Divine Ruins world, Rongxiu's name was illustrious. Many people trembled with fear and reverence when they heard his name. Even Nan Yifan and Yi Wentao did not dare to offend him. However, such a person was by her side now. Just because her hand was injured, he patiently and meticulously applied medicine for her. It seemed like there was nothing more important than this in the world. There seemed to be waves surging in her heart. Finally, she couldn't help but stand up and kiss him lightly on the cheek. My husband is the best. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, he quickly retreated. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Don't think that you won't be able to explain yourself just because of this. Ever since Chu Luiyue had broken through to the divine body level, she had rarely been injured. It was obviously not normal to leave such a mark on her hand. Moreover, they were in Peach Blossom Dock, her own territory. Chu Luiyue exhaled and lay back in the recliner. It's all because of that gate realm. Rongxiu paused. Very troublesome. Actually, he had already guessed that it had something to do with the gate realm in Peach Blossom Dock. He knew that Chu Luiyue, Xin Yi, and the others had gone to the gate realm together. However, he didn't expect her to be injured. Chu Luiyue nodded. I don't know who hid a Xian formation in the gate realm. Moreover, that Xian formation is extremely powerful. It has already affected the entire gate realm. Now, it's impossible to enter and exit the gate realm normally. She shrugged. She was both angry and amused. There's no need to send someone to guard it. Even a high god expert might not be able to escape safely. As she spoke, she raised her hand. Yes, this hand is injured because of this. After hearing Lin Qifei's guess, she felt that it made sense. In order to figure out what was going on, she decided to try it herself. However, just as her hand reached into the gate realm, an extremely powerful force seemed to surge from the surroundings. She had a bad feeling and immediately withdrew her hand without hesitation. Even so, she was still injured. Fortunately, I dodged quickly. Otherwise... Rongxiu's brows furrowed slightly. After all, although Chu Luiyue was only a high god, she had already tempered her divine body through the god-destroying tribulation. With her current divine body, she could even fight against a venerable god. Wasn't Yi Wentao the best example? It seemed that the gate realm had indeed become extremely dangerous. Rongxiu pondered for a moment. I'll go with you tomorrow. Chu Luiyue nodded. A few petals drifted down. Chu Luiyue looked up. The peach blossoms on the tree were in full bloom. Suddenly, something landed between her brows. It was cold. Chu Luiyue was stunned. It's snowing. Rongxiu looked up at the sky as well. The originally azure sky had unknowingly turned into a dark, leaden gray. Sparkling and translucent snowflakes were slowly drifting down. He retracted his gaze and bent down to pick her up. The snow in Peach Blossom Cove came very suddenly. However, for the people who had stayed in Peach Blossom Cove for a long time, this was not a surprise. For many years, the weather in Peach Blossom Cove had been very changeable. Most people were already used to it. In the corridor in front of the door, Sanson was leisurely walking forward with his hands in his hands. As he walked, he was humming a little tune. His small eyes narrowed with a smile, as if he was in a good mood. Yujiu and Shifang happened to bump into him. From afar, they saw Sanson's happy expression. Yujiu and Shifang greeted him. "Third brother, what happened? Why are you so happy?" Sanson said with a smile. Nothing. Yujiu and Shifang looked at each other. There was only one explanation for him to be so happy. "Looks like third brother made a fortune again," Yujiu teased. Sanson put his hands in his hands and smiled brightly. "What? Wasn't it all thanks to Master? I was just about to report the good news to Master." Shifang suddenly thought of something. "Looks like someone has already started to contact third brother." Sanson raised his finger and blinked. "Sure, this matter isn't completely settled yet. It's not too late to be happy after Master makes the decision." Although he said that, the smile on his face was already overflowing. After saying that, he hurriedly bid farewell to the two of them and headed inside. Yujiu held her sword with both hands and looked back and forth between Sanson and Shifang. "Shifang, you seem to know something." Shifang didn't care much. "Actually, it's not a big deal. It's just that third brother plans to open his business outside." Yujiu immediately understood. So he wanted to expand his business. If he did this, it meant that there would be greater profits. No wonder he was so happy. It's normal for third brother to do this. But, open it outside. Where are you referring to? Shifang looked at him suspiciously. How would I know? Yujiu, I knew that I couldn't be referring to him. When Sanson arrived at the inner courtyard, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu were sitting under the eaves and admiring the snow. Master, Your Highness. Sanson tried his best to control the expression on his face before stepping forward. Chu Luiyue turned to look at him and raised his eyebrows. It seems that a lot of people have contacted you recently. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1989. The smile on Sanson's face immediately widened. Hee, Master is really wise. You guessed right. Ever since I spread the news 3 days ago that I intend to sell the herbs and elixirs of the Peach Blossom Cove, I have received news from many aristocratic families. Look, I have already compiled a list of names. Take a look. As he spoke, he presented a piece of paper with both hands. Chu Luiyue took it. On the paper, there was a list of names. Most of them were famous aristocratic families in the world of God. Chu Luiyue was quite familiar with some of them. Sanson rubbed his hands, unable to hide his excitement and eagerness. Master, ever since you defeated Yi Wentao, the Yu residents of the Peach Blossom Cove has become famous. Now, there are many people in the world of God who want to build a good relationship with us. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were trying to curry favor. Everyone in the world of God knew what kind of treasure the Peach Blossom Cove was. Now that this place belonged to Chu Luiyue, they could only settle for the second best. Even if they could not occupy the Peach Blossom Cove, it would be the same if they could obtain the resources of the Peach Blossom Cove. The Peach Blossom Cove was rich with energy from heaven and earth, and there were all kinds of heavenly treasures growing there. Many of them were extremely difficult to find in the entire world of God. Although Sanson had only opened a few shops in the Peach Blossom Cove before, he was actually very famous. Occasionally, there would be some people who came here to buy all kinds of precious herbs and elixirs from him. Ever since Sanson sent out the news, many aristocratic families had expressed their goodwill. On one hand, the things in the Peach Blossom Cove were indeed of high quality. On the other hand, this could be considered as building a relationship with Chu Luiyue. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone, why not? Sanson could almost imagine the scene. Anyway, the Peach Blossom Cove had an almost inexhaustible supply of heavenly treasures in his small space. Hence, it would not affect anything if he took out some of them. Others did not know, but he and his master were very clear about this. In the past, because he was oppressed by the people of the Black Sword sect, he had always been very careful. Now, he could finally let go. Master, take a look at this list. Is there anything you want to change? Chu Luiyue looked up and down a few times. Meteor sect, and these sects, as she spoke, she pointed from above. Sanson leaned over to take a look and quickly memorized it. Apart from these 4, the rest have all been rejected. Chu Luiyue said indifferently. Sanson was waiting happily, but when she heard this, she was stunned. You only chose 4. Reject the rest. There were more than 10 clans listed here. Master hadn't even reached a third of it. Chu Luiyue nodded and handed the paper over. Sanson was very puzzled and stared at the list of names on the paper for a long time. Master, isn't this too little? As for the rest, some of them have big families and businesses. They're pretty good. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows. You should go and ask them. How could they have the nerve to write to me after offending me? Among them, there were quite a few who had conflicts with her in the past. Sanson was stunned. Only then did he remember that his master had been attacked by many clans in the world of divine ruins. He suddenly patted his head and was very annoyed. How could he forget about this? Master, please calm down. It's all my fault. Sanson was very embarrassed. Chu Luiyue looked at him with a smile. All right, I know you didn't do it on purpose. Actually, not all of these clans have dealings with me. However, this is just the beginning. If I choose too many clans at once, it will only attract extra attention. Although 4 clans wasn't a small number, it was still feasible as long as the quantity was controlled. In the world of divine ruins, there were many clans that didn't have enough medicinal herbs and elixirs. Many of them had to be bought from outside. However, there had never been a clan that could provide for 4 clans at once. It was appropriate to let people have some guesses so that they wouldn't dare to look down on Peach Blossom Dock. There was no need to do anything more. Sanson suddenly understood and nodded repeatedly. You're right. Then I'll go and reply to these clans. He wiped the sweat off his forehead. Master was so thoughtful. Chu Luiyue nodded. Go. She was at ease with Sanson's work. Sanson then said goodbye and turned to leave. It seems that you already have a lot of plans. Rongxiao walked over and hugged her waist, resting his chin gently on her shoulder. Chu Luiyue nodded. It's always good to have more friends. After all, she didn't know when the people of Black Demon Cave would make a move. In fact, the people of Black Demon Cave had already suffered several losses at her hands. Especially when Black Sword sect was completely wiped out. They had suffered heavy losses. No one would be able to tolerate it. However, until now, Black Demon Cave hadn't made any moves. Rongxiao's lips curled slightly. Don't worry, Mo Shiqian isn't someone who is willing to suffer in silence. Chu Luiyue turned around and asked with interest. It sounds like you know him quite well. Although she had dealings with him before, that person had always been hiding behind the black fog or the mirror. She had never seen his true appearance. Rongxiao pondered for a moment. You'll get to know him sooner or later. Chu Luiyue was deep in thought. At this moment, the sound of wind suddenly came from the sky. Chu Luiyue seemed to have sensed something and looked up. A muscular snow-white figure quickly pounced over. Ow! Chu Luiyue was delighted. Shue shue. Hearing her voice and seeing her face, Shue shue, who had been running around for a long time, suddenly became excited and wanted to pounce on her. In the end, before it could reach him, a cold gaze fell on it. Shue Shue froze and quickly braked. In the end, it stopped in the courtyard. At this moment, there was already a thick layer of snow on the ground. It stood there, almost blending into the snow. Only its ice-blue eyes became clearer and brighter. Chu Luiyue waved at it. Shue Shue, come here. Speaking of which, she hadn't seen it for a long time. Hearing this, Shue Shue jumped up and came to Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu. It first shook off the snow on its body from a distance before walking forward. Chu Luiyue patted its head. Shue Shue narrowed its eyes in satisfaction and made a gulu sound from its throat. As for its master's gaze, it had completely ignored it. Didn't you hear that my dear you took the initiative to ask it to come over? Humph. Where have you been all this time? Chu Luiyue asked with a smile. Shue Shue thought for a moment, rolled on the ground, and raised its claws. Only then did Chu Luiyue see that the pads of its claws were still stained with a few coarse grains of sand. She was slightly stunned. You went to the Red Moon Desert. Digression, mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1990. Roar. Shue Shue got up and glanced at her mistress with resentment. It's been so hard on me. Chu Luiyue looked at Rongxiu. Rongxiu's expression was gentle. I haven't been back for a while, so I wanted to let Shue Shue take a look at the situation in the Red Moon Desert. Chu Luiyue was relieved. That made sense. Ever since Lingxiao College went through a calamity, Dabao had never appeared again. Until now, there had been no news. She had wanted to go and take a look, but unfortunately, she hadn't had the time. It was indeed quite appropriate to let Shue Shue go. Thinking of this, she looked at Shue Shue. Shue Shue, how's the situation over there? A trace of seriousness flashed across Shue Shue's eyes, and then it shook its head. Chu Luiyue's heart sank. This means, it said that during this period of time, the seniors haven't come out. Rongxiu explained. Chu Luiyue frowned even more. Not even on the day of the Red Moon Desert. Shue Shue shook its head. It had stayed there for a long time, but it didn't notice anything. In fact, during the entire process, those few people didn't even pay attention to it. According to its previous experience, those few people would definitely react if they knew that it had gone over. It felt that something was wrong, so it rushed back. This was the first time it had returned from the Red Moon Desert so cleanly. Chu Luiyue frowned and fell into deep thought. They must have encountered some trouble in the Red Moon Desert. Then, when you were there, did you encounter any suspicious people or things? Shue Shue thought for a moment and shook its head. It was as if nothing had happened there, and it hadn't met anyone. In short, it was like a normal deserted desert. But this was not normal. Chu Luiyue felt uneasy. Putting Diwu Zhangze and Lan Xiao aside, Dabao already had a divine body and could freely travel to and from the divine ruins. He hadn't appeared for such a long time. I'll accompany you to take a look at the situation in the Gate Realm tomorrow. Rongxiu raised his hand and gently smoothed out the faint traces between her eyebrows. If it's convenient, I'll make a trip to the Red Moon Desert. In any case, they had to enter and exit from the Gate Realm. This was perfect. Chu Luiyue felt a little relieved and nodded. All right. Chu Luiyue almost didn't sleep that night. All sorts of images flashed through her mind. Most of them were related to Dabao and the rest. The moonlight was like water, flowing in through the window. Chu Luiyue lay on his side on the bed and finally opened his eyes. Rongxiu approached her from behind and pulled her into his arms. Chu Luiyue instantly fell into his warm embrace. Thinking about the past. Rongxiu's voice was especially low. Chu Luiyue nodded. Yes. After pausing for a moment, she said, at that time, I was able to break through the gate realm and come to Peach Blossom Dock with the help of Dabao and the rest. Speaking of which, it was also a coincidence that she met Dabao and the rest. Back then, when Mu Qinghe led the army to conquer Dahuang Swamp, she secretly followed the army. There was one time when she ran into trouble. In a hurry, she entered Dahuang Swamp and got lost with the others. Later, she met Dabao and the rest. She had learned a lot from them. Even though she had never formally acknowledged them as her master, in her heart, she had always regarded the three of them as her masters. Especially Dabao. He was the strictest to her, but he also taught her the most. It was also their existence that let her know that there was a place like the Divine Ruins realm other than the Tianling dynasty. In the blink of an eye, so much time had passed. Actually, there's something that I've always been puzzled about. Chu Luiyue turned around and placed her hands on his chest. She looked up slightly and said softly. Dabao and the rest were imprisoned in the Red Moon Desert. But you also know how strong they are. In this world, who is it that has such ability? She had always been very curious about this matter, but she had never asked. She could feel that Dabao and the rest did not want to tell her so much. Even the fact that Dabao was unwilling to make a move in the Divine Ruins realm seemed to be related to this. Somehow, she felt that something bad had happened this time. Rong Xiao hugged her even tighter and kissed her forehead. Don't worry, seniors will be safe. Chu Luiyue gently closed her eyes. Definitely. The next morning, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao went to the Gate Realm together. Lin Qifei and Cini accompanied them. Little Hachi did not seem to be interested in these things, so she did not come this time. After yesterday's investigation, Chu Luiyue sent Wu Yao and Yu Jiu to guard here. The moment they arrived, Chu Luiyue clearly sensed that the Gate Realm had changed compared to the day before. The pressure from above was even stronger than before. The aura it emitted was also more dangerous. This change was actually very subtle. If Chu Luiyue had not been here yesterday and personally investigated it, it would have been very difficult to detect it. This was also why the people in charge of guarding here had only noticed something was wrong so late. Look. Chu Luiyue walked to the Gate Realm. The energy fluctuations above have become more dangerous. Rong Xiao walked forward and held her hand, making her step back while he stood in front. He stared at the Gate Realm for a while, then reached out his hand. Buzz! His fingertips had just touched the light screen when there was a sound. Chu Luiyue's heart seemed to have been grabbed by something. Be careful. Rong Xiao nodded, then continued to probe inside. Soon, half of his palm was submerged in the light screen. A biting cold aura instantly surged from all directions. It seemed to want to crush his hand. Rong Xiao's gaze sharpened, and a ball of golden flames erupted from his palm. Boom! Intense energy collided with each other. Shortly after, a crack suddenly appeared on the Gate Realm. Chu Luiyue thought that her eyes were playing tricks on her at first glance. However, she saw a second crack appear right after. The faint cracking sound seemed to come from a distant space. Her pupils contracted. Only then did she see clearly that there seemed to be something hidden within the Gate Realm that was suffused with a faint glow. That was a mirror. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from LoveNet. Chapter 1991. The light screen of the Gate Realm was clearly just a thin layer. However, at this moment, the light rippled as if it was bottomless. The mirror seemed to slowly float up from a clear lake. It gradually approached and reflected a figure. Chu Luiyue looked over. A tall figure appeared in the mirror. It was Rong Xiao, but it didn't look like him. Because the person in the mirror although his appearance and figure were exactly the same as Rongxiu's, was wearing a black robe. It was clearly the same facial features, but it had a completely different expression and temperament. It was cold and disdainful. With just one look, the invisible pressure seemed to be suffocating. Chu Luiyue was stunned. She felt that it was a little unfamiliar, but there was also an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Crash! The huge mirror shattered with a loud bang. The figure inside also dissipated. Chu Luiyue subconsciously looked at Rongxiu. He must have seen the scene just now. However, Rongxiu's expression was calm and grave. The side of his face was handsome and perfect, with smooth lines. There was no change in his expression at all. It was as if he didn't see the scene just now. Or, did he see it but didn't care? Chu Luiyue was about to ask in detail when she suddenly felt a strong force sweeping over from the gate realm. Rongxiu knitted his brows and pulled her into his arms. Then, the two of them fell into a thick darkness. Master! Your Highness! Xin Yi and Lin Qifei's voices sounded, but they seemed to be very far away. In the boundless darkness, Chu Luiyue could only hear the whistling of the wind, which constantly blew past her ears. Around them, wild energy intertwined and killed each other. It wrapped around the two of them and carried them in an unknown direction. This process didn't last long. Moreover, Chu Luiyue was held tightly in Rongxiu's arms. With him protecting her, she wasn't injured. After about an hour, a bright ray of light finally tore through the thick darkness. An intense and dazzling light surged from the front. Chu Luiyue turned her face slightly and narrowed her eyes. Rongxiu hugged her with one hand and covered her eyes with the other. The two of them landed. Chu Luiyue's feet stepped on the sturdy ground, and the floating feeling in her heart finally dissipated a little. At this moment, her eyes had adjusted to the surrounding light. She held Rongxiu's hand and looked up at the surroundings. When she saw the surroundings, she was first stunned, then she frowned slightly. In front of her was a simple and grand city. Outside the tall and majestic city gate, there was an endless stream of people coming and going. It looked very lively. Behind him was an undulating mountain range and a lush forest. To Chu Luiyue, this was a completely foreign place. This is, Chu Luiyue Rong's frown deepened. How did they end up here after crossing the gate realm? The power in the gate realm is rioting, causing the void to tremble. It's very likely that we were sent here in the chaos. Rongxiu looked around and quickly took in everything here as he said calmly. Chu Luiyue nodded. This was the most reasonable explanation. However, Xin Yi and Lin Qifei don't seem to have followed us. She had already checked just now. There was indeed no aura of the two of them around. But thinking about it carefully, this was actually normal. After all, the accident happened too suddenly. At that time, she was still thinking about Rongxiu's figure in the mirror and couldn't react for a moment. If not for Rongxiu's quick reaction, she would have been separated from Rongxiu by now. Since we're here, let's take things as they come. Let's go into the city and take a look. Rongxiu said. Chu Luiyue exhaled softly and nodded in agreement. They had to know where they were before deciding what to do next. She was about to walk forward when Rongxiu suddenly pulled her back. Don't move. What's wrong? Chu Luiyue was stunned. Rongxiu's lips curled up slightly. Are you really going to go over like this? Chu Luiyue came to a realization. Their current appearance was indeed a little eye-catching. There were many unknowns ahead, so it was better to be cautious. 15 minutes later, the two of them finished disguising themselves and completely changed their appearances. Their appearances were ordinary, and their clothes were ordinary. At a glance, they were unremarkable. Fortunately, the two of them were at the edge of the forest, and almost no one passed by them. Therefore, their actions were very concealed. After confirming that everything was ready, the two of them looked at each other and walked towards the city gate hand in hand. The closer they got, the more people there were around them, and the more lively the atmosphere became. As Chu Luiyue walked, she quietly looked around and realized that most people were heading towards the city. Moreover, they were all very young. Most of them were in their teens and 20s, and only a few looked to be around 30 years old. Moreover, these people's faces were full of undisguised anticipation and excitement. It was as if there was something full of temptation waiting for them in the city. Chu Luiyue vaguely felt that this scene was a little familiar. Doesn't it look like Fong State City? Rong Xiu's voice suddenly fell into her ears. Chu Luiyue looked up, and the two of them looked at each other. She suddenly understood. That's right. It did look a little similar to Fong State City. In Fangzhou City, there were also many youthful faces full of vigor. But that was because Fong State City was next to Lingxiao College. Those people were so excited because they looked forward to Lingxiao College. And now, a city that did not seem to have anything special about it, why was it also like this? These people seemed to be quite talented. After looking for a while, Chu Luiyue discovered this point and couldn't help but feel a little strange. This was outside the world of divine ruins. It was reasonable to say that the overall talent and standard of cultivators were slightly inferior to those cultivators in the world of divine ruins. However, among the young people who walked past them, there were quite a few who had outstanding talent and strength. The closer they got to the city gate, the stronger this feeling was. Chu Luiyue became more and more puzzled. Even in the imperial capital of the Tianling dynasty, there might not be so many talented people with great potential. Walking to the city gate, the two of them finally stood still. Chu Luiyue looked up. On the city gate, two words were engraved. Yun State. The handwriting was strong and deep, as if it contained an astonishing aura. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. It was reasonable to say that such a city should be quite famous. But she had never heard of it. She looked at Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu shook his head gently. Obviously, he hadn't heard of it either. Chu Luiyue looked around and muttered in a low voice. No one is in charge of guarding the city, everyone was completely free to enter and leave. Ha ha ha. Since the day the cloud plains appeared, no one had been guarding it. The two of you have already come here. Don't tell me you don't know anything about it. A young voice came from behind. Chu Luiyue looked back and saw a few young men and women standing behind them. The one who spoke was a young man standing at the front. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1992. The young man had a strong build, dark skin, and a chiseled face. He looked very straightforward. Rong Xiu smiled. We are indeed new here, so there are many things we don't know. I wonder if this brother can help me clear up my doubts. Although he had put on a complete disguise and looked ordinary, and his noble aura was almost completely concealed, when he spoke, he was polite and courteous, neither servile nor overbearing. It was very easy for people to have a good impression of him. We don't have that much time. A young woman behind the young man suddenly said. She was quite beautiful. She was dressed in luxurious clothes and exquisite makeup, and her eyebrows and eyes were like a painting. At this moment, she looked at Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue with undisguised impatience. Brother, let's hurry up and enter the city. It won't be good if we're late. She walked to the young man's side and hugged his arm coquettishly. The black-faced young man looked a little hesitant. They were indeed a little late. If they were delayed any longer, seeing this, Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows and chuckled. It seems that you are in a hurry. We won't disturb you. With that, he turned around and was about to leave. Hey, the black-faced young man hurriedly called out to Rongxiu. "Brother, please don't mind her. My sister has always been outspoken and has no ill intentions. Since we've met, it's fate. Why don't we go together and talk about it on the way?" He had a feeling that although the two in front of him looked very ordinary, there was a hint of nobility in their movements. It seemed that they were not ordinary. Most importantly, he couldn't see their strength. The people who came to Yun State could be said to be hidden dragons and crouching tigers. It was better to make friends than to make enemies. As soon as he said that, the woman behind him and the others were a little puzzled. Why did brother seem to be so generous to these two? But since he said so, they naturally couldn't refute. Rongxiu looked at Chu Luiyue. "Madam," Chu Luiyue smiled slightly. "I'll listen to my husband." Rongxiu nodded. "Then I'll have to trouble you all." There was no one guarding the city gate, so everyone could enter and leave as they pleased. Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu also entered Cloud State City with this group of people. The roads in the city extended in all directions, and it was bustling with activity. Walking among them, they were not eye-catching at all. Both sides exchanged greetings and introduced themselves. The black-faced youth was called Hiziji, and the people behind him were his relatives and friends. They had come to the Cloud State to participate in the trial. Hearing this, Rongxiu raised his eyebrows. The Cloud State didn't look very big, but it was able to attract so many young cultivation geniuses to come here for the trial. Obviously, there was something fishy going on. Yeah. This was already the third trial held in the Cloud State. I heard that this trial will last for a month, and it will officially begin tomorrow. If he was a day later, he wouldn't be able to make it in time. If you miss it, you'll have to wait for another half a year. Hiziji explained. This trial. Is it very important? Rongxiu asked back. Hiziji looked at him in surprise, as if it was very abnormal that Rongxiu didn't know anything about this. Of course. Hiziji emphasized. If you can pass the trial, you will be qualified to enter the Gate Realm. Enter the Divine Ruins world to cultivate. Countless cultivators in the world are scrambling for it. As he said that, he lowered his voice. Do you know the Empress of the Tianling dynasty? She entered the Divine Ruins world from here. Cough, cough. Chu Luiyue coughed violently. Digression, Aunt Meng is still sleeping. I'll come back at 6:00. I was wrong. My computer is broken. I used my cell phone to send it, but it automatically cancelled the section. I owe you an update. I'll start updating tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1993. There was no one else who could eat melons on their own heads. Hiziji and the others looked at her in confusion. Chu Luiyue waved her hand. Cough, it's nothing, it's nothing. I just suddenly choked. However, where did you guys get this news? Why didn't she know that she had used this method to enter the Divine Ruins world? You guys don't know about this. Hiziji and the others' gazes became even stranger. Hizailan curled her lips slightly and said disdainfully, Big brother, only the people with status in the few great dynasties know about this. Who knows where they came from? It's normal that they don't know. Chu Luiyue, even though she had always been sharp-tongued, she couldn't think of anything to refute this time. She touched her nose and ignored her man's somewhat mocking gaze. We have naturally heard of the name of the Tianling dynasty's princess. Rongxiu didn't seem to care about Hizailan's words and chuckled softly. But we have always lived in seclusion before, so we have never heard of this matter. Hiziji frowned and looked at his sister with a warning look. It was indeed a bit too much to say such words in front of others. Fortunately, the other party didn't seem to mind. He Xylan snorted softly, but didn't dare to be presumptuous again. He Ziji pondered for a moment. It seemed that these two people really didn't know anything, he asked tentatively. Then, do you two know about the Divine Ruins world? Rong Xiao nodded. He Ziji heaved a sigh of relief. Knowing this, it wasn't difficult to explain. It's a long story. More than a year ago, the Tianling dynasty's princess, Sheng Wanyu, broke through the Door realm and entered the Divine Ruins world. Moreover, it was said that she was still doing well in the Divine Ruins world and was famous. Everyone yearned for it, so naturally, they all wanted to imitate her. However, how could it be so easy to enter the Divine Ruins world? Many people begged for it, but there was no way in. It was only when the trial in the Cloud State began that they were given a rare opportunity. It was said that breaking through to the High God realm was a piece of cake in the Divine Ruins world. Therefore, everyone was rushing to Yunzhou. Tomorrow was the day of the third trial. Therefore, the entire Yunzhou city was bustling with activity. This explanation was easy to understand. However, Chu Luyue still frowned. Because there was a crucial problem in all of this. How did the news of her going to the Divine Ruins world get out? She did not deliberately publicize this matter, so there were not many people outside the Divine Ruins who knew about it. How did it spread to such an extent that it was causing such an uproar? There were even rumors that she was doing extremely well in the Divine Ruins world. Someone was deliberately leaking this information. But, what was the purpose? If she had not come here today, she would not have known that such a situation had occurred outside the Divine Ruins world. It was clear that the enemy's primary target was not her, but cultivators like He Ziji and the others. Chu Luyue looked around and asked in a seemingly casual manner. Since they're all here for cultivation, why are all the young cultivators here? Why aren't there anyone else? He Ziji laughed heartily. Naturally, it's because only cultivators under the age of 35 can participate in the trial. Furthermore, the younger one was, the better one's talent was, and the better one's results would be in the trial. This rule is a little strange. Chu Luyue thought to herself. Generally speaking, only when the academy recruited students or the sect selected disciples would there be a limit to the age of the cultivators. She did not know what kind of situation this trial was. There was actually such a rule. It's also because of this that many young cultivators are flocking to this place. He Ziji said. Naturally, this was also the reason why they were here. Seeing that Rong Xiao and Chu Luyue were deep in thought, He Ziji thought that they were also tempted. He raised his hand and pointed forward. Yes, that Heavenly Yin Mountain is the place for tomorrow's trial. Brother Bai Li, if the two of you want to participate, you can go there tomorrow. Rong Xiao and Chu Luyue were both using aliases. Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. Go directly. That's right. As long as you are not over 35 years old and have reached a certain level of talent and strength, you can participate in the trial after passing the gatekeeper's test. Gatekeeper. That's right. The most outstanding batch of people selected from the trial will be able to follow the gatekeeper to the Divine Ruins world. As He Ziji spoke, his face revealed a hint of longing. It could be seen that he was indeed filled with anticipation for this matter. Rong Xiao's expression became somewhat meaningful. It seemed that this trial was specially organized by someone. That's right, the other party deliberately attracted so many talented cultivators, so they naturally had to make all the arrangements. However, He Ziji and the others did not realize what Rong Xiao was thinking. They only thought that he was still thinking about participating in the trial. As they spoke, the group walked to the door of an inn. The trial would begin tomorrow, so they naturally had to rest well today. He Ziji and the others chose to stay here. Chu Luyue and Rong Xiao were too lazy to bother and also stayed. After the two sides said goodbye, they each returned to their own rooms. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu's rooms were on the third floor, facing the street. When they opened the window, they could see the bustling crowd on the street. Looking into the distance, they could see row upon row of houses in the city, as well as, in the distance, the towering heavenly Yin mountain. Chu Luiyue crossed her arms and leaned against the window coffin. She could not help but smile. I didn't expect that after so many troubles in there, it's still like this when I come out. I've been away for so long, but there are still people thinking about me. Rong Xiu poured a cup of tea. White mist rose in spirals, enshrouding his handsome face. Madam is too outstanding, that's why people can't forget you. Chu Luiyue snorted softly. I don't think it's a good thing to be remembered like this. Someone was deliberately revealing her whereabouts, but she did not even know who the other party was. She really did not like the feeling of the enemy being in the dark while she was in the light. Anne. I have always felt that the appearance of this Yunzhou is very strange. Chu Luiyue raised her hand, and her slender white fingernails lightly scratched the hollow wooden window. Her eyes flashed. Although the entire city looks quite old, many places in the city have obviously just been renovated. Look, even the paint on the window is newly painted. But the workmanship is very meticulous. Everything looked tidy, clean, and simple. Most people would not be able to tell. What's more, most of the people who came here were cultivators participating in the trial. Who would pay attention to this? Rong Xiu picked up the teacup, lowered his eyes, and put it down again with a half-smile. Maybe, it was not an accident to come here from Peach Blossom Dock. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1994. Chu Luiyue's eyes lit up. You mean, the Gate Realm leads directly to this place? Rong Xiu's smile deepened. We'll know when we go to the heavenly Yin mountain tomorrow. The entire cloud state was immersed in excitement and excitement. Early in the morning, Chu Luiyue was woken up by all kinds of noises outside. He could even hear a few familiar voices outside the door. Big brother, are you really going to ask those two to come with us? He Xylan asked arrogantly. I think they don't even know what this trial is, so they probably won't go. Let's not bother about them. She really didn't like those two. Their appearances and clothes were clearly very ordinary, but when they saw them, they didn't show any respect at all. She really didn't know what was so good about those two. He Ziji glanced at her. More friends means more paths. Why don't you understand this principle? Why don't I understand? I think Big Brother is the one who's confused. If they really participate in the trial, won't they become our competitors? Who would find themselves competitors? He Ziji shook his head and didn't intend to continue persuading her. His sister didn't have a bad heart, but she was spoiled, willful, and narrow-minded. There were so many people who came to participate in the trial, and there were almost countless competitors. What difference would one or two more people make to the result? On the contrary, if he could rope them in, he might have a higher chance of winning in the final competition. He had a feeling that these two people weren't so ordinary. Thinking of this, he Ziji walked over. Just as he raised his hand and was about to knock, the door was pulled open from the inside. A tall figure appeared in front of him. He Ziji's movements froze. Brother Bailey, what, you're already up? From the looks of it, what they said just now had probably been heard. He Ziji was embarrassed. Rong Xiu only nodded with a normal expression. My wife and I also plan to go to the heavenly Yin mountain today. He Ziji looked at him and found that he didn't seem to have any intention of pursuing the matter. He couldn't help but secretly sigh in relief. He didn't know why, but in front of this man, he always felt an inexplicable sense of reverence. Even though the other party had always been very polite and courteous, the natural nobility and pressure that seemed to come from his bones was still hard to ignore. Then let's go together. When the time comes, we can take care of each other. What does Brother Bailey think? Ziji asked nervously. That couldn't be better. Chu Luiyue walked up from behind and said with a smile. Ziji was slightly taken aback. He didn't notice it yesterday, but now that he was standing close to her, he realized that this woman actually had a pair of extremely beautiful eyes. Especially when he smiled. As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, Rongxiu turned around and reached out his hand to Chu Luiyue. He conveniently blocked Ziji's line of sight. Only then did Ziji come to his senses. He immediately retracted his gaze, feeling vexed in his heart. It wasn't as if he had never seen a beautiful woman before, so it was rather rude of him to do so. He took a step back. Then shall we go over now? Otherwise, there will be a lot of people on the street later. The moment they stepped out of the door, Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu realized what Ziji meant. Because the number of people on the street was much more than yesterday. It was still early in the morning. In a while, it would really be crowded. Chu Luiyue looked at the lively crowd and suddenly said, "There are so many people here. Quite a number of people have come. I'm afraid that many geniuses from various empires have rushed over," Xilan sneered. Of course. As a cultivator, who doesn't want to cross the gate realm and enter the divine ruins world and become a high god expert? Even if the hope was slim and there were many difficulties, there were still people who came one after another. As she spoke, she scanned Chu Luiyue from head to toe and snorted. People like you basically have no chance. When Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu came, they had deliberately suppressed their cultivation bases. Xilan only thought that the two of them were not high in cultivation, so she did not put them in her eyes. Chu Luiyue was not angry at this, and only smiled indifferently. Her purpose for coming here was different from theirs. Seeing Chu Luiyue's reaction, Xilan felt as if her fist had landed on cotton. She was a little angry, so she simply snorted coldly and did not say anything else. However, at this moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly said softly, "So you're saying that those who had the best results in the trial all entered the Divine Ruins world?" "Of course." Xilan replied resolutely. "If not for that, why would so many people come to the Cloud region?" This woman's question was truly laughable. Just as she was about to ridicule him a little more, she heard Chu Luiyue continue, "Then have those people ever returned after entering the Divine Ruins world?" Xilan was stunned, and then looked at her as if she was looking at a monster. "Of course not. After going to the Divine Ruins world, who would return here?" The Divine Ruins world was an existence that everyone yearned to go to. If one had the opportunity to go there, break through the shackles and become a high god powerhouse, or even stronger, how many cultivators yearned for this the most? Who would return? A dark light flashed in Chu Luiyue's eyes, but it disappeared in an instant. Xilan wanted to say something else, but she was pulled by Ziji, so she could only shut up. After that, the group did not say anything else and just continued forward. There were more and more people around them. Mixed in the crowd, they were not very eye-catching. They were like drops of water merging into a river, swept in the direction of the heavenly Yin mountain. After about an hour, they finally arrived at the foot of the heavenly Yin mountain. The terrain here was open, and everyone stood in groups of 3 to 5. From afar, it was a vast expanse of darkness. There were at least 500 to 600 people. Furthermore, these people could be considered rare cultivation geniuses outside of the Divine Ruins. Even Chu Luiyue had never seen so many talented young cultivators gathered together in the Tianling dynasty. There should be a lot of cultivators from the dynasty here. But with so many people gathered together, it was not noisy. Most people did not speak much, and only a few whispered a few words. There was an inexplicable tension in the atmosphere. Obviously, they were all quite concerned about the trial that was about to begin. Chu Liuyue's gaze swept across the crowd intentionally or unintentionally. She actually wanted to see if there were people from the Tianling dynasty here. Suddenly, her eyes narrowed. In the crowd in the distance, there was a young man standing alone. He was only wearing a loose gray linen shirt, and there were no extra accessories on his body. His already thin figure became even thinner. Her soft, short, golden hair glowed faintly under the morning sun. Chu Liuyue's heart suddenly jumped. Xiao Zhou. Digression, 6:30 a.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1995. Almost at the same time, Xiao Zhou sensed her gaze and raised his head to look over. The moment he saw Chu Liyue, his eyes widened slightly. Surprise, joy, disbelief, many emotions surged out, almost causing his emotions to surge. He subconsciously raised his leg, intending to come over. Chu Liyue shook her head calmly. The small boat immediately understood and stopped in its tracks. He forced himself to look away. I almost forgot, this is Cloud State. There were still many people watching him in the dark. He could not act rashly at this time, lest he bring her any trouble. Thinking of this, Xiao Zhou lowered his head slightly, as if nothing had happened. All of this happened in the blink of an eye, and there was a crowd between the two sides, so even if someone noticed Xiao Zhou's momentary daze, they would not be able to tell what was going on. Chu Liyue quickly retracted her gaze. However, her heart was still beating rapidly. She never thought that she would run into Xiao Zhou here. When she decided to go to the Divine Ruins world, Xiao Zhou was still unconscious. Chu Liyue could only leave him behind. Who would have thought that they would meet again here? She did not know how his body was now, and why did he appear here alone? Countless questions surged in her mind. Chu Liyue took a deep breath. Rong Xiu followed her gaze and immediately understood why she had such a reaction. He held her hand. His slightly calloused palm was broad, strong, and very warm. Chu Liyue's heart gradually calmed down. Since everyone was here, there was no hurry to meet each other. Let's see what the heavenly Yin mountain was like first. Just as she was thinking, the sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Chu Liyue subconsciously looked up and saw a figure flying up from the top of the heavenly Yin mountain. Noticing the commotion, everyone quieted down completely and raised their heads to look. Some people could not help but reveal excited expressions, and their eyes were filled with admiration as they looked at that person. Chu Liyue had a faint guess in her heart. This person, perhaps, Heavenly Yin Mountain Gatekeeper, Hongin. Welcome, everyone, to participate in the trial today. As expected. Chu Liyue's mind calmed down. This person was indeed the so-called gatekeeper. She narrowed her eyes slightly and carefully sized up that person. He floated in the air, high and mighty. He looked to be in his 30s and was not tall, but the pressure from his body could not be ignored. High God! Chu Liyue's thoughts. This kind of strength was very common in the Divine Ruins world, but here, it was an extremely top-level existence. Sure enough, as soon as the pressure spread out, the expressions of the many cultivators at the foot of the mountain became solemn. The expression between their brows became even more respectful and careful. This was that person's goal. That person looked around and revealed a somewhat satisfied expression. His deep and sonorous voice continued to ring out. The rules of the trial are very simple. Chu Liyue could not help but chuckle in her heart. The rules were simple indeed. She just did not know what they were planning to do to the Heavenly Yin Mountain. Of course, if you want to participate in this trial, you have to pass the examination first. As Hongin spoke, he waved his sleeve. A palm-sized bronze mirror instantly flew out of his sleeve. The bronze mirror fell from the sky and grew with the wind. Thud. With a muffled sound, the bronze mirror stabbed straight into the ground. At this moment, it was already as tall as a person. The mirror was covered in rust and looked very old. However, the expressions of the people present became more and more serious when they saw this item. They all understood that this was a hurdle that they had to pass. Whether they could participate in the trial depended on this. If they could not pass the examination, then all their previous preparations would be in vain. "I'll go first." A voice sounded from the crowd. Then, a young man walked forward. There was nervousness on his face, but more than that, there was excitement and excitement. Under everyone's gaze, he walked step by step to the bronze mirror. Hong-an said, "Don't be nervous. Just try to come over." The young man's Adam's apple bobbed. He nodded, took a deep breath, and walked forward. Then, his leg successfully stepped into the bronze mirror. Chu Luiyue stood at the side and could clearly see that the young man's leg had indeed reached the other side of the bronze mirror. The mirror, which looked a little dim earlier, was now like a ripple. It swayed gently without any obstruction. The young man looked delighted and continued to walk forward. In the blink of an eye, he successfully walked through the bronze mirror. "I passed! I passed!" He cheered excitedly. Hong-an nodded satisfactorily. "Very good. You can go up the mountain now." "Yes." The young man was greatly encouraged and immediately rushed up the mountain excitedly. The forest was dense, and his figure soon disappeared behind the trees. Everyone watched with different expressions. Some were envious, some were jealous. Everyone began to go up one after another. However, not everyone could pass through the bronze mirror. Chu Luiyue watched from the side and realized that about 1/5 of the people were rejected by the bronze mirror. That was equivalent to being eliminated. Looking at the dejected people, Chu Luiyue touched his chin. "I wonder what the standards of the bronze mirror are." However, the bronze mirror looked very familiar. Chu Luiyue had a vague guess in his heart. However, before he found clear evidence, he had to remain skeptical. "Brother, let's go," He Xilan urged. He Ziji took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay." At this moment, there was a sudden commotion in front of them. Chu Luiyue looked over and immediately frowned. Xiao Zhou was standing in front of the bronze mirror. Half of his arm had already reached in. It was obvious that he could enter smoothly. However, he lowered his head slightly, and for some reason, he pulled his arm back. This action shocked everyone present. Hong-an's expression was also slightly serious. "What's wrong with you?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1996. Xiao Zhou retracted his hand, took a step back, and said indifferently, "I don't want to participate in this trial anymore. I quit." As soon as he said that, everyone was shocked. The scene suddenly fell into an awkward silence. Many people looked at each other. What was going on? He said he didn't want to participate and he didn't want to. Half of his arm had already reached in, and now he said he wanted to quit. This was too casual. Hong-an obviously did not expect Xiao Zhou to say such a thing, and his expression turned cold. "Are you sure?" There were countless cultivators who wanted to participate in this trial. This was the first time he had seen someone suddenly want to quit halfway through. Moreover, it was obvious that he could get it through the review. It's good that he quit. This way, we'll have one less competitor. That's right. He doesn't want to participate, but there are many people who want to participate. He really doesn't know what's good for him. All kinds of discussions could be heard in low voices. Little Boat's expression seemed to waver a little. He pursed his lips, and after a moment, he said hesitantly, let me think about it. After saying that, he took a few steps back and made way. There was a burst of laughter from the crowd. Think about it again. Who did he think he was to put on airs like this? The gatekeeper's temper was not that easy to deal with. Hong'an also frowned, and he was very annoyed. He had never encountered such a situation before. Those who were able to come here were all here for cultivation. Who would repeat this? He was about to reprimand him when his gaze suddenly froze. That young man was actually a rank 9 warrior. And it seemed that he was only a step away from breaking through to the high god realm. He didn't look old either. Among these people, he was indeed one of the best. Thinking of this, he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. If he really let him go, it would be a great loss. Hong'an hesitated for a moment, and his expression relaxed. Then I'll give you some more time to think about it. Everyone was in an uproar. Obviously, they did not expect Hong'an to be so lenient and give the young man a chance to go back on his word. Xiao Zhou heard this, but there was not much surprise on his beautiful and exquisite face. He just nodded. Continue. With Hong'an's order, the others no longer cared about the small boat and began to line up again for the inspection. After that, the process went very smoothly. He Ziji and He Xilan successfully passed, but the remaining people who came with them were all eliminated. He Ziji then turned to look at Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue. He was also very curious as to whether the two of them could pass. Rong Xiao walked in front. His expression was calm as he walked forward. The surface of the bronze mirror flowed past him like water. With a single step, he crossed the bronze mirror and successfully passed. Chu Luiyue followed behind Rong Xiao. After Rong Xiao went over, it was her turn. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes as he recalled Xiao Zhou's reaction. He was on high alert. Of course, Xiao Zhou would not do that for no reason. He had his own considerations, and at the same time, he was warning her. Chu Luiyue suppressed her aura as much as possible and walked forward. Buzz! The moment she touched the surface of the mirror, alarm bells went off in her head. The water droplet that had been quietly floating in her dantian seemed to be summoned by some kind of power and was ready to move. Fortunately, Chu Luiyue was already prepared. She took the initiative and forcefully restrained the force around her body, stopping the flow. The fluctuation that was about to rise was forcefully suppressed just like that. Her hand smoothly reached out to the water-like mirror. Then, she took a step forward and passed smoothly. The whole process only took a few breaths. From the beginning to the end, Chu Luiyue's expression did not change at all. She was as calm as ever. No one knew what she had experienced in that moment. Rong Xiao reached out his hand to her. Chu Luiyue then realized that her palms were drenched in sweat when Chu Luiyue's warm and dry hands held them. Rong Xiao's fingertips gently rubbed the back of her hand. Chu Luiyue's heart finally calmed down. She looked at the bronze mirror with a complicated gaze. There was a very strange power hidden inside. When she passed by, she could clearly feel that someone was observing her. That feeling sent a chill down her spine. However, it was clear that the people in the surroundings did not notice anything amiss. Those who passed were excited and happy. Those who failed were lonely and regretful. Chu Luiyue's eyes drooped slightly as she thought to herself. Little Boat should have felt the existence of that strange power before. That's why, Brother Bailey, I heard that the Heavenly Een Mountain is very dangerous. Let's go up together so that we can take care of each other. How about it? He Ziji was clearly waiting here for this plan. Although He Xilan was somewhat dissatisfied, seeing that Rong Xiao and Bai Li had successfully passed the examination, she could not say anything more. Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue looked at each other for a moment. Okay. After discussing, they headed up the mountain together. They were not slow and quickly entered the forest. After walking for a distance, Chu Luiyue turned around to take a look. Through the dense forest, she could still vaguely see the scene in the bronze mirror. When she turned back, Little Boat just happened to raise his leg and smoothly passed through the bronze mirror. Everything looked no different from the others. However, he did not team up with anyone and continued to be alone. After standing still for a moment, he chose to go up the mountain alone. Chu Luiyue retracted her gaze. A quarter of an hour passed quickly. Chu Luiyue and the others walked in the forest, but did not encounter any problems. The wind blew through the forest, making rustling sounds. This place doesn't seem to be as dangerous as the legends say. He Xylan muttered in a low voice. She had been nervous for so long. We just came in. Whether there is danger or not, we will know later. He Ziji's expression was very serious. Young Master He, you said before that the duration of this trial is a month. Chu Luiyue suddenly asked. Although this Heavenly Yi mountain is tall and steep, it shouldn't take that long to climb to the top, right? Even an ordinary person without any cultivation base would finish climbing in 2 or 3 days. If it was a cultivator, it would only be faster. Even if there were some traps and dangers in the middle, a month's time was indeed a bit long. He Ziji said, because this is only half of the trial. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Actually, you are right. Generally speaking, it only takes a few days to reach the top of the mountain. And the order of climbing to the top of the mountain also determines the ranking of the trial. But after that, everyone will have to stay at the top of the mountain for a while until a month later, the gatekeeper will bring people to the Divine Ruins world. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1997. Oh. Why is that so? Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows slightly. Since the ranking of the trial will be out once we reach the top of the mountain, why should we wait here for another month? If they really wanted to bring people to the Divine Ruins world, they could just go directly. Why go through so much trouble? He Ziji was stunned for a moment. Because this is the rule that was set from the beginning, there was no reason. From the moment they knew of the existence of this trial, the rules had already been set. This was like something that had been set by convention. No one would break the casserole and ask about it. If the gatekeeper said so, then they would do so. It was that simple. Previously, He Ziji had not thought about this question. Hearing Chu Luiyue's question, he was a little puzzled. But he could not figure it out. After thinking about it and not getting an answer, He Ziji scratched his head. This, probably because so many people are going to pass through the gate world, so they have to make more preparations. Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu both came from the Divine Ruins world. Naturally, they knew that this guess was impossible. If that was the case, then this matter was even more problematic. Suddenly, a scream was heard, breaking the silence. The few of them looked back and saw a few people running towards them in a panic. All of them looked panicked and had blood on their bodies. It was obvious that they had just gone through a fierce battle. Roar! Behind them, a gray-winged demon wolf was rapidly approaching. The forest was dense and it could not move freely. However, as a 9th-grade demon beast, its speed was still very shocking. Those people were being chased by it until they were in a sorry state. Save us! I beg you! The youth running at the front shouted in panic. He Xylan pulled He Ziji's sleeve. Big brother, we are in a competition. How can we help others? If they were close to their own people, then so be it. But these people were strangers to them. Why should they save them? What's more, they brought the danger to us. He Ziji nodded. Although he had always been warm-hearted, he also knew that he had to act appropriately. He did not want to lose his life because of this. "Let's go." He Ziji growled and turned around without hesitation. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao naturally did not want to interfere. They had already made up their minds. They wouldn't attack if they could. As long as they could reach the top of the mountain, they would be able to find out what they were up to. Seeing these people turn around and leave without any intention of helping, despair flashed in the eyes of those people. In this trial, there was a tacit rule: once you participate in the trial, life or death doesn't matter. If he died here, he would have died in vain. Despite the dangers, there were still countless cultivators who rushed forward. Because in this world, the strong were still respected. However, Chu Luiyue had only taken a few steps when he suddenly stopped and looked back. Rong Xiao stopped and followed her line of sight. With this look, he also noticed that something was wrong, and his expression became slightly restrained. When the two of them stopped, they quickly attracted Ziji's attention. His eyes widened slightly as he asked in disbelief, "You guys aren't really going to help, are you? This is a trial." Those people were all their opponents. Of course, Chu Luiyue did not want to help. She only felt that there was something wrong with that gray-winged demon wolf. Thinking of this, she took a step forward and flicked her wrist. A snow-white ray of light streaked across the sky, heading straight for the gray-winged demon wolf. Chee! The sound of a sharp blade piercing flesh made one's teeth ache. Then, there was a muffled sound. Bang! That gray-winged demon wolf fell heavily to the ground. A dagger as thin as a cicada's wing had almost completely sunk between its eyebrows. Dark red and sweet blood slowly flowed out. The gray-winged demon wolf's eyes bulged, and its expression was ferocious. However, it still gradually stopped breathing. Finally, its head tilted, and it was completely dead. Ziji and Xilan were both shocked. One move. This woman had actually used a single move to kill the gray-winged demonic wolf. This meant that her dagger had not only pierced the gray-winged demon wolf between its eyebrows, but had also shattered its beast core. What kind of strength was this? Ziji had long thought that these two people might be much more powerful than they seemed on the surface. However, when he truly saw this scene, his heart was still filled with shock. In any case, he asked himself, he definitely did not have this ability. Xilan also shuddered. The way she looked at Chu Luiyue had also undergone a great change. She did not doubt that if the other party wanted to, she could definitely use the same method to easily take her life. After all, she could not even defeat this gray-winged demon wolf. Thinking of her previous offenses, Xilan's entire body was covered in cold sweat. However, Chu Luiyue did not have the mind to pay attention to these two people. She walked in that direction. Rong Xiao walked side by side with her. The few people who had just escaped from danger were all stunned on the spot. Looking at the gray-winged demon wolf's corpse, they could not regain their senses for a long time. The gray-winged demon wolf that had almost taken their lives had died just like that. Only when they heard the sound of footsteps did they regain their senses. Many thanks. The youth who had shouted for help at the beginning looked at Chu Luiyue with a face full of gratitude. The remaining people also hurriedly expressed their thanks. It was just that their faces were still in shock, and they looked really miserable. Chu Luiyue did not pay attention to them. She walked straight to the gray-winged demon wolf's side and bent down to pull out the dagger. The bright and sharp dagger was not stained with the slightest bit of blood. She turned her gaze and looked at the gray-winged demonic wolf. Not getting a response, the few people were a little embarrassed. However, thinking that their lives had been saved by her, they were still very grateful in their hearts. "May I know your names? In the future, you can go down the mountain." Chu Luiyue straightened her body and said indifferently. "What? The few people were all stunned and looked at each other. This meant, to let them withdraw from the trial. That's right, if she did not make a move, they would not be able to continue participating in the trial. Moreover, with their current state, they probably would not be able to win. Then, the youth in the lead hesitantly opened his mouth, wanting to inquire about Chu Liuyue's identity so that he could repay her in the future. Chu Liuyue just lazily waved her hand. No need to thank me. I did not intend to save you. These words made it impossible for them to respond. Seeing that Chu Liuyue did not seem to want to say anything more to them, the few people did not continue to pester her. After solemnly thanking her again, they went down the mountain. The figures of the few people quickly disappeared. He Ziji and He Xilan looked at each other, both puzzled. If she wanted those people to withdraw from the trial to reduce a few opponents for herself, it did not seem to make sense. With her strength, she obviously would not put these people in her eyes. Chu Liuyue's eyes drooped slightly. Looking at the faint mark on the gray-winged demon wolf's neck, she seemed to be in deep thought. This gray-winged demon wolf had an owner. Digression, 6 p.m. mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1998. More importantly, it seemed to be the kind that had been specially tamed, and there were some subtle differences between it and ordinary contracted magical beasts. The wound on the gray-winged demonic wolf's neck had already healed, and it was covered very well by its hair. If one didn't look closely, they wouldn't notice it at all. Judging from the state of the scar, it should be quite deep. This gray-winged demonic wolf must have suffered a lot. Outside the Divine Ruins world, if one could contract a 9th-grade magical beast, they would be overjoyed. Who would be so ruthless? Unless the other party didn't put this 9th-grade gray-winged demonic wolf in their eyes at all. He Ziji and He Xilan looked at each other strangely. They didn't understand why Chu Liuyue and He Xilan kept staring at the corpse of the gray-winged demonic wolf. But when they thought of the strength she had just displayed, the waves in their hearts still couldn't calm down. She should have her own reasons for doing so. It seems that this heavenly Yin mountain is indeed not very peaceful. The corner of Rong Xiu's mouth raised slightly as he smiled faintly. Chu Liuyue glanced at him and knew that the two of them were thinking of the same thing. She nodded and smiled as well. That's right. But this trip is quite worth it. She looked in the direction of the mountain peak. Let's go. I wonder what other surprises are waiting for us up there. The few of them continued to walk towards the top of the mountain. Probably because she still had lingering fear from the scene just now, He Xilan didn't dare to be presumptuous anymore. She ran to He Ziji's side and followed without a word. From time to time, she would look at Chu Liuyue. Her eyes were filled with curiosity and inquiry, as well as a trace of envy and jealousy. This woman looked to be less than 20 years old. Her entire body was ordinary and there was nothing eye-catching about her. But who would have thought that her strength would be so powerful when she made a move? With this level, she would probably be able to get into the top few in this trial. As for her husband, although he hadn't made a move until now, He Xilan didn't dare to underestimate them anymore. Without He Xilan's noise, the surroundings instantly became much quieter. He Ziji wanted to ask a few questions, but in the end, he chose to give up. The two of them were likely stronger than he had expected. The few of them walked in silence. Probably because Chu Liuyue's body carried the bloody smell of the gray-winged demon wolf, which was quite intimidating, they didn't encounter any trouble in the next hour. Chee! A piercing sound was heard all of a sudden. They all stopped at the same time. He Ziji was the first to raise his guard. Who? A moment later, a figure appeared in their line of sight. Chu Liuyue calmed down. Small boat. His speed was extremely fast and his movements were nimble. After a few leaps in the forest, he was already not far away from them. Then, he stopped on top of a tree and looked up at the few of them. Ziji and his sister immediately became nervous. "It's you. Wasn't this the young man who was hesitating in front of the bronze mirror?" He was born extremely beautiful and delicate, with a head of soft golden short hair that was unforgettable. They had a deep impression of him, so they recognized him the moment they saw him. "What do you want to do?" Ziji sensed a strong bloody smell on the young man's body, and his brows furrowed. However, Small Boat didn't pay attention to him. He only glanced at him indifferently, then turned around and broke off a branch that was as thick as a thumb, and threw it out. Immediately after, a painful and short cry came from not far away. Ziji and Island's expressions changed. This was a human's voice. Was he killing someone? However, after a short moment of shock, they quickly accepted this fact. Because in this trial of the heavenly Een Mountain, life and death didn't matter. Competition and even killing each other was allowed. Once you died here, you couldn't blame anyone else. If you wanted to blame someone, you could only blame yourself for not being strong enough. But, just by throwing out a branch, he ended a cultivator's life. This kind of strength really couldn't be underestimated. Small Boat turned around and looked over. Just when Ziji thought that he was going to come over, he retracted his gaze and quickly left with a few leaps. That thin and frail figure soon disappeared into the forest. He left just like that. Island let out a long breath. "I thought he was going to come over and fight us." Ziji's hanging heart also relaxed. "We have more people, he shouldn't dare to act rashly." As he spoke, he glanced at Chu Luyue and Rong Xiao beside him. For some reason, he had a faint feeling that the reason why the young man didn't come over was because of these two people. Was it because of some kind of fear? But no matter what, they had avoided trouble. That young man's strength was clearly above theirs. Thinking of this, Ziji felt bitter in his mouth. He had long heard that those who came to Cloud State City to participate in the trial were all top geniuses, all of them extraordinary. But he didn't expect that the few he met were all stronger than him. Originally, he was still quite confident in himself. Now, the trial had only started for a short while, and his self-confidence was almost shattered. This small episode didn't seem to have any effect on them. After Small Boat left, they quickly continued forward. On the way, they met with a few more troubles, but to Chu Luyue and Rong Xiao, it was nothing. The two of them didn't even do much, leaving most of the work to Ziji and his sister. The talent and strength of these two siblings were actually not bad. If they weren't compared to Chu Luyue and his sister. Of course, this comparison was very hooligan. During this process, Chu Luyue's thoughts were more focused on the magical beasts that appeared in the forest. Later on, they met two 9th-grade magical beasts. Without exception, their bodies were also covered with similar wounds as the gray-winged demonic wolf. Obviously, these were magical beasts that someone had reared and deliberately released at this time. As for the purpose, it was clear as day. It was nothing more than a quick screening of the people participating in the trial. 2 days passed quickly. On the morning of the 3rd day, a clear and melodious whistle came from the top of the mountain. Chu Luyue looked up. At this time, they were already 2/3 of the way up the mountain, barely able to see the figure of Hong'an hanging in the air above the mountain. These few days, he had been there, monitoring the progress of the entire competition. "Looks like someone has already reached the top." Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows and said softly. Ziji and his sister both looked disappointed. It was a pity that they didn't get first place. Ziji thought for a while, and finally couldn't help but ask. "Brother Bailey, you clearly have a chance to get first place. Why, mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network." Chapter 1999. Why were they stalling for time? It doesn't matter if we're first or not, as long as we're in the first batch, we'll pass the trial, right? Chu Luiyue interrupted him with a smile. It's a coincidence that we're here for this trial. We're not too obsessed with first place. As long as the final result is the same, nothing else matters, right? He Ziji was speechless for a moment. He could tell that the other party's words were sincere. They really didn't care about first place. Perhaps this was the confidence that came from their powerful strength. He Ziji was a little emotional, envious, and relieved. In fact, they were right. As long as they could get the last place, it didn't matter whether they could get first place or not. Since someone's already here, this trial should be over soon. Rong Xiu looked at Chu Luiyue. Let's go. After making this decision, the group's speed quickly increased by quite a bit. They didn't encounter any more trouble on the way. After about 2 hours, they finally arrived at the top of the mountain. At this time, there were already 7 or 8 people standing at the top of the mountain. Xiao Zhou was also among them. Seeing the 4 of them appear together, the people at the top of the mountain were slightly stunned. They almost all came up alone. At most, there were 2 people together. There had never been a situation where all 4 of them arrived together. The 4 of you actually came together. Hong'an had already landed from mid-air and recorded the names of the people who came up one by one. Seeing the few of them, there was a flash of surprise in his eyes. I remember that you all started moving together from the foot of the mountain, right? Seeing that Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu didn't intend to speak, He Ziji hurriedly said. Yes. Hong'an looked at them. The 4 of them didn't seem to be injured. There were only sporadic bloodstains on their bodies. The others also joined forces, but very few of them could rush up together. It seemed that they were quite strong. Hong'an's expression became a little more eager. Congratulations, you've passed the trial. Then report your names in order. He Ziji stepped forward first and reported his name and age. He Xilan followed closely behind. Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue were the last to arrive. Of course, their names were fake. However, when he reported his age, Chu Luiyue suddenly had a thought and changed the answer he had prepared earlier. 17. Hearing this, Hong'an's eyes lit up, and he carefully looked at Chu Luiyue. You're only 17. Chu Luiyue looked to be about 20 years old. Now that she suddenly said 17, it suddenly seemed a lot smaller. Actually, the difference between a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old girl wasn't that big. Although the people around were a little surprised, they didn't pay too much attention to it. However, Hong'an seemed to be exceptionally happy. Yes. Asked Chu Luiyue in a seemingly nonchalant manner. Is there something wrong? Hong'an chuckled. No. I just feel that 17 years old really has a limitless future. Chu Luiyue smiled faintly, as if she believed his words. By the way, there's still some time before the end. You guys can rest on the side first. Hong'an's attitude was obviously better than before. And this was only because he heard that Chu Luiyue was younger than expected. 17 years old, she was currently the youngest one here. Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes to hide the ripples in her eyes. She responded softly and retreated. Many people around them looked at them. Chu Luiyue pretended not to see them. After retreating to the side, she began to wait quietly. Another 4 hours passed, and it was noon. People came up one after another. When the 50th person arrived, Hong'an finally put away the booklet in his hand. At the same time, he blew the whistle again. This whistle meant that those who had yet to arrive had all been eliminated. Some of them were only a short distance away from the top of the mountain. After hearing the whistle, they were all shocked and annoyed. However, the outcome was already decided, and no one could change it. After wandering around for a while, these people finally returned. The people who stayed at the top of the mountain were naturally overjoyed. Passing the trial meant that they could enter the Divine Ruins world. After confirming that no one else came to disturb them, Hong-an looked at the people in front of him. He had an appreciative smile on his face. First of all, congratulations to everyone for passing the trial. This also means that you are one step closer to the higher level. With just a few words, many people's hearts were surging. The excitement on their faces were even more than when they were at the foot of the mountain. However, everyone should know that after this, we still need to wait here for a month before we can go to the Divine Ruins world. During this period of time, everyone would be able to rest and recuperate. They could also continue to train. After a month, we will set off. There was no problem with this. Everyone was very happy when they heard this. So the reason we stayed here during this period of time was to let us adjust our condition to the best of our ability. Ziji revealed a look of relief. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Chu Lue smiled. If only it was that simple. But unfortunately, this Hong-an really didn't have any good intentions. Most of them were indeed injured, but they weren't very serious. With such injuries, a few days would be enough to completely recuperate. Why would it take a month? Chu Lue found a seat at the edge and sat cross-legged. Rong Xiu took the opportunity to sit beside her. The others also found their own places to stay, planning to wait for this month. Xiao Zhou didn't come over to greet Chu Lue and the others. Instead, he sat alone on the right side of Chu Lue. As long as they looked up, they would be able to see each other. The top of the lunar mountain seemed to have been cut off by something. It was very flat and wide. It was more than enough to accommodate the 50 of them. Everyone sat down separately. After exchanging a few pleasantries, they all quieted down. Some people began to try to heal their injuries. Some were absorbing the energy of heaven and earth to cultivate. In short, everything looked normal. After Hong-an finished counting the number of people, he rose into the air again and hovered in midair. Chu Lue raised her eyes and took a look. Why did he go up again at this time? She kept feeling that this kind of attitude was a little arrogant and strange. It even made her feel like she was being watched. Chu Lue finally suppressed the thoughts in her heart and gently closed her eyes. Time passed silently, and the mountain wind blew. Dusk fell, and the full moon hung high in the sky. A trace of coldness swept over. Chu Lue suddenly opened her eyes. The force in her body was quietly flowing away. Digression: there are 2 more updates at 8:00 mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 2000. This feeling was very subtle. If she didn't have the Tianjing Yuan meridian and was extremely sensitive to the force, she wouldn't have noticed that something was wrong so quickly. She subconsciously moved and wanted to get up. Rong Xiu's voice suddenly came and fell clearly into her ears. Chu Lue immediately restrained herself. At this time, it was indeed not a good time to act rashly and alert the enemy. She looked around without batting an eyelid. It was quiet all around. Everyone was in their positions and didn't seem to be wrong. Most of them probably hadn't noticed that their strength was flowing away. After looking around, Chu Lue retracted her gaze and looked at the ground in front of her. The flat and rough mountain rock was grayish-white. Under the moonlight, it reflected a few faint phosphorescent lights. The light didn't seem to be abnormal. However, the force that had flowed out of her body earlier had flowed into the mountain rock below her. There was obviously something below. After thinking for a moment, Chu Lue bent her fingers slightly and then flicked gently. "Ah!" He silence suddenly exclaimed and jumped up. "Who hit me?" The scream was heard and immediately woke up everyone present. Everyone turned to look at them. Everything was going well, so it was hard for anyone not to be startled by this sudden change. Hong'an was resting with his eyes closed. When he heard the noise, he immediately opened his eyes. He frowned. "What's wrong?" Everything was going well. Who knew that it would be interrupted like this? He was in a bad mood. Naturally, his expression wasn't any better. Hearing his majestic voice, Xilan immediately became nervous and her voice became much softer. I. Someone just attacked me. Who attacked you?" Hong'an looked around. Everyone was in their respective positions. Attack? It didn't seem right. Yes. I don't know. Xilan was cultivating when she suddenly felt a pain in her back. She was shocked and subconsciously thought that someone had attacked her. When Hong'an asked, she answered without thinking. But now that she had calmed down, she felt that something was wrong. She had no grievances with the people here. Who would attack her? Moreover, it was in front of so many people. Most importantly, she couldn't tell where the force came from. In this case, it would be difficult for her to identify. There was a hint of impatience on Hong'an's face. Xilan became more timid and panicked for a moment. I don't know. Hong'an's expression became worse. Xilan was afraid that he would blame her and quickly said, but I'm really injured. Lord Hong'an. Hong'an narrowed his eyes. Where are you injured? Xilan blushed and murmured, I hurt my back. After all, she was still a young girl. She was still a little embarrassed to say this in front of so many people. But there was no way to check her back. She couldn't possibly zest no one to be sure. Hong'an examined, feel injured even if she to injury to everyone's eyes were focused on Xilan, making her feel uneasy. It's fine, it hurts so much that it was probably purple. But it really wasn't much of an injury. It seemed like she was making a mountain out of a molehill and deliberately stirring up trouble, Hong'an said in a deep voice. Since you're fine, just stay here. Even if you don't want to cultivate, don't hold up the others. His words were a little harsh. Xilan bit her lip, feeling wronged. Yes. Hiziji hurriedly said, Lord Hong'an, please don't be angry. My sister has been spoiled by the family. She gets flustered easily, but she doesn't have any bad intentions. Don't worry, I'll teach her a lesson. I won't do it again. Hong'an glanced at him. Remember what you said. If you can't stay here, you can leave. You should know that even if you've passed the trial, you may not be suitable to enter the Divine Ruins world. In the past, there were people who were eliminated in this 1 month. His words were full of warning and threat, which immediately alerted everyone present. Hiziji also broke out in cold sweat. Yes. As he spoke, he hurriedly pulled Xilan to sit down. The farce seemed to have come to an end just like that. Chu Liyue turned his head slightly and asked softly, just now. What happened? Xilan was feeling wronged, but when she heard Chu Liyue's question, she couldn't hold it in anymore. Someone really attacked me just now. He injured me. Hiziji shouted in a low voice, Xilan. Don't say any more. Don't you think you've caused enough trouble? It wasn't easy for them to pass the trial. They couldn't let their efforts go to waste and be chased down the mountain. When Xilan was yelled at by him, the grievance in her heart exploded. She couldn't help but cry and sob. Even Big Brother didn't believe her. Chu Liyue blinked his eyes, and his voice became even softer. From the looks of it, she doesn't seem to be lying. But everyone stayed in their own positions. Who could have attacked you? He Xilan didn't expect Chu Liyue to speak up for her. She immediately felt grateful in her heart. She clenched her fists, gritted her teeth, and said hatefully, "Who knows what's going on? I think, maybe there's a problem with the Heavenly Yin Mountain." Digression. Chapter 2001. Xilan. Ziji's heart skipped a beat as he hurriedly covered her mouth. "What nonsense are you talking about? How could such words be said so casually?" Xilan blurted out those words and immediately regretted it. She hurriedly looked at Hong'an. However, Hong'an had already closed his eyes and seemed to be deep in thought. He did not care about the situation here. After confirming that he had no intention of continuing to pursue the matter, Ziji heaved a sigh of relief. His entire back was soaked in cold sweat. Xilan's tears fell on the back of his hand, making him angry and distressed. However, he could not vent his anger. "Xilan, this is not home. You can't be willful. You must be careful with your words and actions in the future, understand?" Xilan nodded while crying. At this moment, she also realized the seriousness of the matter. Chu Liyue smiled and said gently, "Yes. This is the Heavenly Yin Mountain. How could there be a problem? It must be a misunderstanding." Ziji looked at her gratefully. He originally thought that this woman's temperament was a little cold, but he did not expect her to speak up for him at this time. "Thank you. No need. It was fine as long as everyone was safe and sound." After Chu Liyue finished speaking, he did not say anything else. Everything seemed to have returned to normal. However, Xilan's words just now were heard by many people around. Some people secretly exchanged glances, and all of them were suspicious and uneasy. Looking at Xilan's appearance, it did not seem like she was lying. After all, creating such rumors would not benefit her in any way. Why did she have to be so thankless? However, her situation was indeed a little strange. If these people present did not make a move, then who else could it be? This Heavenly Yin Mountain. Was there really a problem? On the surface, this farce had indeed subsided, but in many people's hearts, the seeds of doubt were planted. First, it was Xilan. Who knew if this kind of thing would happen in the future, and whose turn it would be? Who knew, they might even be more heavy-handed, their minds were in a mess, and they did not have the mood to heal or cultivate. An inexplicable sense of unwillingness and anxiety quietly surged among the people at the top of the mountain. Hong'an frowned. He finally opened his eyes and looked down. With such a ruckus, all their previous preparations had been wasted. His heart was filled with anger, but he couldn't vent it. These people were not stupid. Once they realized that something was wrong, they would definitely react quickly. Therefore, he had to be more careful. Even if they were delayed, they could only accept it. At most, he could just make up for it later. After convincing himself like this, Hong'an's mood finally calmed down. However, this peace did not last for long. 2 hours later, the same thing happened once again. However, this time, the one who was ambushed was a young man around the age of 20. His shoulder blade had been cracked. Moreover, he didn't know who did it. The first time, it might have been a misunderstanding, but this time, there was no way to explain it. Furthermore, his injuries this time were more serious than before. Everyone's heart sank when they saw the young man sitting on the ground with a pained expression on his face. What's going on? Once, twice. Would there be a third time, or even more? Who can say for sure? If it's even more brutal in the future, I'm afraid his injuries will become more and more serious, or even, could it be that there's really something fishy about the Heavenly Yin Mountain? Everyone discussed animatedly, and many people already wanted to investigate the Heavenly Yin Mountain. Hong'an's suppressed anger surged in his chest. There's nothing wrong with the heavenly Een mountain. Someone is definitely messing with us. After this happened, he couldn't continue to stay high and mighty, so he could only return to the top of the mountain. He walked to the young man's side and personally examined him, but he didn't find anything. This made Hong An's head hurt even more. In fact, he had been paying close attention to the situation at the top of the mountain. However, he didn't notice how this happened at all. It was as if the strength of the sneak attack had suddenly appeared out of thin air. But this was too strange. If the people present did anything, they definitely wouldn't be able to escape his eyes. But he didn't notice anything. Hong An asked the people beside him to bandage the young man's wounds. The surroundings were silent. After this happened twice in a row, everyone was very uneasy. Xilan couldn't help but whisper. "Big brother, I already said that there's something wrong with this place. I'm really not talking nonsense, look at this. What if this was just the beginning?" Who knew what would happen next? Ziji frowned and looked at her, indicating for her to stop talking. But even if Xilan didn't say it, everyone present already had the same thought in their hearts. Hong An stood up, thought for a moment, and waved his sleeve. A huge red barrier immediately enveloped everyone. "Alright, don't make wild guesses. Now that I've set up a barrier, the same thing won't happen again. You guys can continue to rest in peace," Hong An said in a deep voice. However, at this time, these words clearly had no effect. Everyone was still standing in place, not daring to sit down, rest, or cultivate. They felt that it wasn't safe. Rong Xiu suddenly said, "This brother is injured and shouldn't be able to stay any longer. Should we send him down the mountain?" His voice was clear and indifferent, but it instantly reminded everyone. That's right. His shoulder blade was cracked, and it had a huge impact. In this situation, Hong An actually didn't mention letting him leave from the beginning to the end. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 2002. Hong An's brows furrowed, but they soon relaxed. "It's just a small injury. You'll recover in 10 days to half a month." As he spoke, he looked at the injured youth. "Do you want to leave the mountain and give up the chance to enter the Divine Ruins world or continue to persevere? Choose for yourself." Chu Luiyue sneered in his heart. These words were too interesting. Those who came here were all aiming for the Divine Ruins world. He deliberately said this, so of course it would make people waver. Sure enough, when the young man who was still hesitating heard this, his expression immediately became more determined. "I choose to stay." Although the injuries on his body were not light, he would definitely be able to fully recover within a month if he took good care of himself. It was not easy for him to pass the trial and come to the top of the heavenly Een mountain. If he gave up and chose to leave, he was really unwilling. Hearing his answer, Hong An's face revealed a trace of admiration. That's right. It was not easy to become an expert. One had to put in a lot of effort and pay a price. If one was timid and hesitant because of a small matter, then in the future, there would be no future to speak of. These words caused the expressions of many people around to change. Wasn't this implying them? However, Hong An's status was noble, and his words were not completely unreasonable, so everyone fell silent. Alright, let's all stay here. Hong An looked around and after saying this, he walked to the side. This time, he did not go up again. Instead, he stood not far away from the crowd. It seemed that he was planning to guard them strictly. The crowd did not say anything else and returned to their positions, waiting quietly. Xilan tugged at Ziji's sleeve and lowered her voice, "Big brother, I think this place is really strange. Why don't we go back?" Of course, Ziji would not agree. For this trial, They had prepared for so long and sacrificed so much. How could they give up just like that? Seeing that Xylan seemed to be a little afraid, Ziji patted her hand and patiently persuaded her. All right, Xylan, don't think so much. Isn't Lord Hongan right next to us? He'll definitely be fine. Xylan's lips moved. Seeing her big brother's determined expression, she knew that she would not be able to persuade him. Therefore, he had no choice but to give up. Got it. Ziji patted her head in relief before retracting his gaze. However, this consolation did not make Xylan feel at ease. She lowered her head and wrung her hands together. Big brother didn't know, but she did. Someone must have ambushed her just now. Furthermore, the other party's strength was definitely above hers. No, it should be said that the other party was above Hongan. To be able to avoid his scrutiny and make a move silently, twice at that, it was simply terrifying. Of course she wanted to go to the Divine Ruins realm, but she had to be alive first. Xylan was full of anxiety, her mind was a mess. She couldn't calm down to cultivate, so she had to look around from time to time. Many of the other people present had the same thoughts as her. Those who could come here were no ordinary people. There were some things that when one thought about it carefully, one would vaguely sense that something was wrong, which would then make one's back feel cold. Just like that, a day slowly passed amidst everyone's uneasiness and suspicion. In the blink of an eye, it was the night of the second day. Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged with her eyes closed. When the moon rose into the sky, that familiar feeling came again. This time, she was prepared, so she sensed that something was wrong the moment the force in her body was devoured. Her heart skipped a beat. There was a Xian formation under the mountain rock. It wasn't obvious yesterday, but today, the energy fluctuation was as clear as day. She didn't know if it was originally like this, or if Hongan had done something out of worry. However, no matter what, Chu Luiyue finally confirmed her previous guess. The corner of her lips lifted slightly, and an extremely faint smile flashed across her face, which disappeared in an instant. The moon was high in the sky, and the night breeze was cool. Everyone's hearts, which had been hanging for half a day, finally gradually calmed down. It seemed that yesterday's incident was really just an accident. However, their happiness didn't last long, as another youth's body shook and directly vomited blood. Puff! Bang! That youth's face turned pale, and he fell to the ground with a dull thud. This was especially clear on the originally quiet mountaintop. Third brother. A slightly older young man next to him was shocked and hurriedly went forward to help him. Third brother. What happened to you? Everyone looked over, and when they saw the messy dark red bloodstains on the youth's face and body, their expressions changed. Hongan also rushed over immediately. What happened? The youth propped himself up. His mouth was full of blood, and his face was pale. He had just said 2 words when he coughed violently. That wretched appearance was truly frightening to look at. The youth beside him first took his pulse, and then his expression turned ugly. Third brother has suffered internal injuries, and I'm afraid it will be difficult for him to recover without a month or 2. As he spoke, he directly tore apart the youth's clothes. There was a purplish-red mark on his back. It was obvious that this was a newly added scar, and it was also this force that caused him to suffer internal injuries. When the youth heard this, his expression turned even darker. 1 or 2 months, this was still optimistic. In any case, no matter what, there was no way to continue participating in this trial. Dragging a sick body to the Divine Ruins world, wasn't that courting death? Hongan's brows were also furrowed, and a fire burned wildly in his heart. How could this be? He had been waiting by the side and guarding very carefully. If these people did anything, he would definitely be the first to notice. But now, Things had happened just like that, and he had not noticed at all. The surroundings were silent. Everyone's gaze moved back and forth between Hong and the youth with different expressions. Hong felt like there was a blade on his back. There could be one or two, but not three. The same thing was happening again, and each time it was more serious than the last. It was obvious that the people present were already wavering. It was definitely impossible to use the previous excuse to fool them. The youth hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said, "Lord Hong-an, I want to bring third brother down the mountain. His injuries can't be delayed." The youth immediately dissuaded him. "Second brother. I can go down by myself, don't delay you, how can you do it by yourself like this?" The youth interrupted him, not allowing him to say anything. Although it was a pity to give up this opportunity, his third brother's life was more important. Hong-an took a deep breath, as if he had made a decision. "You don't have to leave. I'll bring you to a place to recuperate." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2003. The moment these words were spoken, everyone was taken aback. Hong-an stood up and waved his sleeves. The surrounding red barrier instantly dissipated. Immediately after, a wooden tablet flew out of his hand. Buzz! Following the buzzing sound, a huge silver barrier appeared before everyone's eyes. A powerful aura continued to spread out from above. Everyone on the top of the mountain was stunned by this scene. Their faces were filled with astonishment and shock. Chu Liuyue's eyes lit up. "It's here." Behind this barrier is a small, independent space. It is also the closest existence to the Divine Ruins world, which is only a single gate away from it. Only by passing through this barrier and entering can you truly see the Door Realm and step into the Divine Ruins world. Originally, this barrier should only open after a month, but since you don't want to stay here anymore, why don't you go ahead of time? With just a few words, everyone's hearts surged. This heavenly mountain was quite strange. Strange things happened frequently, and they couldn't stay any longer. If they could enter ahead of time, it would naturally be best. Hong-an looked at the two brothers. In that small space, the energy of heaven and earth is abundant, and there are many heavenly materials and earthly treasures. After you go, you can take good care of yourself. When your body recovers, you can leave at any time. Of course, if you still want to go to the Divine Ruins world at that time, you still have the opportunity. "Thank you, Lord Hong-an." When the two brothers heard this, they immediately became excited and happy, thanking him repeatedly. There was no better result than this. Hong-an waved his hand. In fact, he was very annoyed. He should have brought these people here for a month, but only 2 days had passed. He didn't get anything, and he had to send them in. He had really suffered a huge loss this time. But in the current situation, there was really no better solution. If he suffered a loss, so be it, as long as it didn't affect the overall situation. Moreover, there were a few good people in this batch. In the end, there might even be a reward. Thinking of this, his mood finally became a little better. He took the lead and flew in front of the silver barrier. "Now, everyone, line up and enter in order." Almost immediately, someone stepped forward. "I'll go first." Such a great opportunity was really tempting to them. Who didn't want to be first? Who didn't want to become stronger? In the face of huge benefits and temptations, almost no one could remain rational. Apart from Hong-an, there were only 50 people here. The process progressed very quickly. In just a short while, a third of them had already entered. The young man supported his younger brother and followed in. Everyone could see the excitement on their faces. Rong Xiu chuckled. "Even after suffering such serious injuries, you still refuse to give up. You're really amazing. Chu Luiyue looked on coldly. She rarely helped strangers. The main reason he made a move this time was to find out Hong An's plan. They had already gone this far, but the two brothers still chose to stay. No one could help him in this situation. Shall we go too? He Ziji said. Subconsciously, he looked at Rong Xiao and Li Tianlan. For some reason, he felt an inexplicable sense of security when he followed them. He Xilan's feet seemed to be nailed to the ground. Big brother, can we not go in? I keep feeling that something is wrong. He Ziji only thought that she was still worried about what happened before, so he said, there's nothing wrong. You're just scaring yourself. Don't worry, I'm here to protect you, okay? He Xilan stomped her feet. She also knew that it was impossible to stop now. Unable to persuade her big brother, she could only agree. At this time, more than half of the people had already entered. Chu Luiyue laughed and looked at Rong Xiao. Let's go. Let's see what kind of world it is inside. Rong Xiao nodded and held her hand. The two walked side by side. He Ziji and his sister followed closely behind. After experiencing so many things before, they had now subconsciously regarded Rong Xiao and Li Tianlan as their backbone. The small boat arrived in front of the silver boundary. The soft and fine hair on his forehead covered his eyebrows and eyes. Therefore, at this time, no one saw his slightly frowning eyebrows and the hesitation and disgust that quickly flashed in his eyes. What's wrong? Hong An stood in front of the boundary. Seeing the small boat stop, he felt strange and asked. Are you going back on your word this time? He had a deep impression of this golden-haired young man. If not for the fact that his talent and strength were really outstanding, he would not have given him face before. I'm telling you, this time, there's no chance to go back on your word, do you understand? Hong An was very annoyed by these things. What little patience he had left had long been exhausted when he opened the enchantment. So at this time, he was not polite when talking to the small boat. The small boat's eyes flashed and he nodded gently. I know. With that, he directly lifted his foot and stepped into the boundary. On the boundary, a wave flashed and disappeared in a flash. Hong An glanced at it and inexplicably felt that something was wrong, but he could not tell what was going on. Suddenly, a clear and melodious voice rang out, interrupting his train of thought. Lord Hong An is really kind to open the boundary in advance for everyone. Chu Luiyue had a smile on his face, as if he was very grateful. I really don't know how to thank you. Seeing that it was her, Hong An's face looked better and he chuckled. It's nothing, it's what I should do. After all, those gathered here are all top cultivation geniuses. He lifted his chin, you guys go in quickly too. Chu Luiyue responded and was about to lift her foot when she suddenly stopped. She looked up and looked at the center of the boundary. There, a wooden tablet was floating quietly. This was thrown out by Hong An just now. This huge boundary was also summoned by it. Hong An followed her gaze and frowned slightly. What's wrong? What's so good about this wooden tablet? Chu Luiyue's lips curled up and said with a faint smile, nothing, I just feel that, Lord Hong An, your wooden tablet looks a little familiar. Digression, come at 6 mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 2004. Hong An immediately became alert. Oh. You've seen it before. Chu Luiyue smiled. Back then, I inadvertently saw a similar wooden plaque in a small stall. At first glance, it really does look quite similar. But that was far from being as exquisite as yours. If you look closely, the shape is also not quite the same. Hong An's hanging heart was finally at ease. So that was it. What kind of good thing could a stall have? It was most likely just a wooden plaque that happened to look similar. After all, things like wooden tokens generally didn't have much of a difference. You're of noble status, so the things you carry are naturally extraordinary. How can those crude things compare to them? Chu Liuyue's calm words completely dispelled Hong An's suspicions. He laughed. All right, they're all trivial things. There's nothing to be concerned about. Hurry up and go in. Don't delay. Chu Liyue readily agreed. Rong Xiao took a step forward. When he passed through the barrier, his eyelids drooped slightly, and a trace of darkness flashed in his eyes. You. He turned around and called out. Chu Liyue held his hand and followed him in. A thin ripple spread out into the surroundings. Rong Xiao calmly raised his hand. The ripple was instantly annihilated and completely dissipated. It was as if it had never appeared. The entire process took only a moment. Hong An's gaze happened to be elsewhere, so he did not notice it at all. The two figures quickly disappeared into the barrier. He Ziji and his sister quickly followed after them. After passing through the barrier, Chu Liyue stood still and looked ahead. The mountains were lush and verdant. There was a valley below, and a river meandered through it. The energy of heaven and earth was abundant. It was not inferior even to the Yuntian Tower. But this was not what surprised Chu Liyue the most. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she stared fixedly at the scenery in the distance. The sky was blue, and there were no clouds for thousands of miles. A curtain of light fell from the sky. It really was the Gate Realm. Everyone that had arrived successively were all stunned on the spot when they saw this scene. Their hearts were filled with excitement as they looked at the door of the light curtain that was like a miracle, and their eyes were filled with excitement. Gate Realm. Was that the Gate Realm? Lord Hong An is right. The heaven and earth energy here is many times more abundant than outside. As long as we pass through that Tao Gate world, we should be able to reach the Divine Ruins world, right? This place is already such a fairyland-like existence. I really wonder what kind of scene it would be inside the Divine Ruins world. All sorts of discussions could be heard. Most of them were sighs and yearning. Obviously, everything before their eyes had a huge impact on them. Even He Xilan, who was a little reluctant before, was shocked when she came in and saw this scene. She couldn't help but sigh. So this is how it is inside. After being stunned for a short while, she shook He Ziji's arm excitedly. Big brother. Luckily, we didn't leave. Otherwise, it would be a huge loss. This trial was indeed worthy of its reputation. He Ziji's face was also filled with unconcealable excitement. Otherwise, why would there be so many cultivators coming here one after another? Such a cultivation treasure land is hard to come by. Yes. Outside the Divine Ruins world, how could there be such a cultivation place that is comparable to the first-rate families in the Divine Ruins world? Chu Liuyue's expression was slightly restrained as countless thoughts flashed through her mind. The reason why countless cultivators yearned for the Divine Ruins world was because it was rich in heaven and earth energy and had all kinds of resources. Outside the Divine Ruins world, it was almost impossible to break through to the high god level. However, if there was such a cultivation environment, what was the difference between it and the Divine Ruins world? That Tao Gate world could even be considered as a meaningless decoration. The appearance of such a place was obviously abnormal. Rong Xiao squeezed her palm. Be careful. There are high gods here, and there is more than one. The voice entered her ears and knocked on her heart. Chu Liyue nodded without batting an eyelid. The moment she entered this place, she sensed several obscure yet powerful auras around her. However, because she had not broken through to the high god level, she did not dare to be very sure. However, since Rong Xiu said so, the more Chu Luiyue looked, the more she felt that this place was strange. At this moment, Hongen, who was the last person, also entered the boundary. He raised his hand and put away the wooden token. However, the boundary behind him did not dissipate. This was because it existed in the first place. The wooden token just summoned it. Suddenly, a figure flew over from the mountain top in the distance. That person was extremely fast. In a few breaths, he was in front of everyone. It was a man who looked to be about 30 years old. He was dressed in a black robe and had a tall figure. There was a scar on his face. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly. He was also a high god expert. Hongen, why did you let him in so early? Scarface frowned. His originally stern and cold face became even more ferocious. The crowd, who were originally full of excitement, quieted down when they heard this and looked at each other in dismay. Who was this person? Why did it seem like he did not welcome them? Hongen stepped forward. Something happened at Heavenly Yin Mountain, so I brought them here in advance. Since they were going to come here in the end, it shouldn't matter if they came earlier. As he spoke, he gave Scarface a look. However, Scarface did not fall for it. His frown deepened. What problem could there be at Heavenly Yin Mountain? Even if there was, you should have sent a message back first. How could you bring them here so rashly? Being reprimanded in front of everyone, Hong An's face was a little embarrassed. The expression on his face also faded. These are all extremely talented cultivators. Some of them are even outstanding. If Master sees them, he will definitely be happy. At the mention of Master, Scarface was clearly a lot more afraid. He looked at everyone again and said impatiently, "You brought them here. You're the one who brought them here. You're responsible." With that, he turned around and left. Hong gritted his teeth. He wanted to curse, but he held back in the end. At this time, there was no need to waste his mood on such trivial matters. However, the conversation between the two aroused the suspicion of many people. Master? What master? He Xilan asked in a daze. Big brother, aren't we going to the Divine Ruins world? Why did a master suddenly appear? From what Hongen said, could it be that they were going to meet that master? He didn't say anything about this before. He Ziji shook his head and motioned for her not to speak. In fact, he also felt a little uneasy at this moment. After Scarface left, the scene fell into a strange silence. Hongen turned around and did not seem to have noticed this strange change as he said, "That's right. Everyone, please follow me." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 2005. No one moved. At this point, if they still couldn't see the problem, they would really be stupid. Lord Hongen, where exactly is this place? Who is your so-called master? Someone boldly asked. Everyone's eyes were focused on Hongen. He chuckled. Where is this place? Don't all of you see it clearly? This is a small space that is close to the Divine Ruins world. As for the master, it's naturally the master. I've never said that I'm a rogue cultivator, right? Seeing that everyone was on alert, he secretly cursed Scarface in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. To be honest, we were originally a force in the Divine Ruins world. However, we are only a branch here. Regarding the trial, to be honest, we have our own selfish motives. Our goal is to attract everyone here. After all, everyone present is a top genius. If you can join us, it will definitely be like adding wings to a tiger. Hearing this, the expressions of many people present eased a lot. So he wanted to recruit people. If that was the case, it wasn't difficult to understand. However, If that's the case, Lord Hongan can explain it in advance. Why? Why was there a need to be so secretive and almost cause a misunderstanding? Hongan smiled. You may not know, but the Divine Ruins world has its own rules. It's not appropriate to recruit people from outside, so we naturally can't make a big fuss. I originally wanted to bring you in and count you as a member of the Divine Ruins world before recruiting. I didn't expect that I didn't make this clear and almost caused a misunderstanding. His attitude was very sincere, and his tone was calm and patient. Many people immediately chose to believe him. After all, no matter what, his strength was here. Moreover, the heaven and earth energy here was abundant, and it was indeed a good place to cultivate. Why would such a powerful existence deceive them? Of course, if you don't like it, you can choose other sects after entering the Divine Ruins world. We won't stop you. Chu Luiyue sneered in his heart. What a nice way to put it. These people had never been to the Divine Ruins world, so they knew nothing about the situation there. In fact, the Divine Ruins world was vast, and the major families and sects were all separated by a great distance. If he were to go there rashly, he would probably die on the streets before he could even figure out what was going on. If that was the case, anyone who had some understanding of the Divine Ruins world would know how absurd and laughable it was. However, if the people present knew about this, they wouldn't have participated in this so-called trial in the first place. So that's how it is. It seems that we have misunderstood you. The person who raised the question first apologized profusely. The attitude of the remaining people also changed. The never-before-seen cultivation ground and the continuous appearance of high gods were very confusing. Chu Luiyue wanted to speak, but after careful consideration, he decided to wait and see. She wanted to see if the person behind all of this was what she thought. It's your first time here, so please follow me to rest. Seeing that everyone had been appeased, Hongan finally felt relieved. He turned around and flew towards a mountain peak. Everyone followed closely behind. 15 minutes later, they arrived at one of the mountain peaks. During this journey, they didn't encounter anyone else. Everyone, please stay here for the time being. The door realm will open in a month, and everyone will go there again. At this point, everyone basically believed Hong An's words and expressed their approval of this proposal. The mountain peak was tall and handsome, more than enough to accommodate 50 people. Hong An even specially gave the injured youth a good medicinal pill to let him recuperate. This series of actions naturally made everyone more convinced of him. After doing this, Hong An planned to turn around and leave. However, just as he took a step, the sky suddenly darkened. Chu Luiyue looked up. Above the clear and cloudless sky, dark clouds were rapidly converging. Her heart sank. This scene looked inexplicably familiar. What's going on? He Xilan asked softly. Could it be that some heaven and earth treasure is about to appear? Ha! Everyone, don't worry, it's just that someone on that mountain peak is about to break through. Hong An raised his hand and pointed to the mountain peak beside him and laughed. There's a barrier around this mountain peak, so it won't be affected. As he spoke, dark clouds gathered, and wind and thunder rumbled. Someone murmured in shock. Such a big movement, is someone about to break through to the high god level? Many people looked envious when they heard this. Hong An's eyes flashed. In the Divine Ruins world, it's normal to break through to the high god level. With everyone's talent, if you cultivate here for a while, you might be able to break through the shackles. His words made many people's hearts burn with excitement. Chu Luiyue looked up at the darkening sky and narrowed her eyes. From the looks of it, they didn't seem to have been summoned by the other side. Rumble. A sudden clap of thunder rolled out from the layers of clouds. It was deafening. Then, everyone saw a silver snake-like Tianlei gathering quickly. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. The Tianlei was coming for them. As soon as this thought flashed through her mind, the powerful Tianlei came crashing down. It was heading straight for them. She quickly turned her head and saw that Hongen had retreated far away. Digression, 6:30 p.m. 5th update. I don't think there's a catch-up today. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2006. Everyone's expressions changed drastically when they saw the rapidly descending Tianlei. How was it aimed at the mountain next to them? It was clearly coming for them. When they saw Hongen, who had unknowingly dodged, a trace of uneasiness appeared in everyone's hearts. Dodge! Someone exclaimed. Not many people would be able to withstand such a bolt of heavenly lightning. Some people quickly rushed out of the mountain, but they were quickly intercepted. Bang! The person who wanted to rush out first was sent flying and fell heavily to the ground. Everyone looked over and saw that a barrier had suddenly appeared outside the mountain. It was the barrier that Hongen had mentioned earlier. However, at this moment, not only was the barrier unable to protect them, but it also trapped all of them here. Lord Hongen. What do you mean by this? With danger approaching, everyone became agitated. Hongen clearly wanted to kill them. What a pity. Hongen looked down at them with a smile on his face, but his eyes were bloodthirsty, cruel, and indifferent. I didn't want to attack you directly, but unfortunately, you don't have that kind of luck. Previously on Heavenly Een Mountain, strange things happened frequently, and it made his heart beat faster. In the end, he had no choice but to bring them back in advance. Although this could not completely squeeze out their strength, it was quite a loss. However, compared to letting them go, it was much better. Especially when there were a few good seedlings among them. Hearing Hong An's words and looking at his expression, how could they not understand? He had purposely brought them here so that he could make a move on them. Boom! Everyone did not have much time to be angry and resentful because the Tianlei had already struck. As expected, the barrier didn't manage to stop the heavenly lightning. Retreat! Everyone dodged backward. However, the speed of the heavenly lightning was extremely fast, and it contained an extremely terrifying energy. Crack! The Tianlei landed, and a deep gully immediately spread out. The wild energy swept out in all directions. Those who stood closer and did not have time to dodge were the first to bear the brunt of it. Chu Luiyue and the others stood further away and dodged quickly, so they were not affected. However, for most of the people present, this was undoubtedly a nightmare. Boom! Before everyone could catch their breath, the Tianlei in the sky was still rapidly emerging. From the looks of it, it was obvious that he was planning to end everyone here. Third brother. A mournful and sorrowful roar sounded. Chu Luiyue looked over with a frown. As for the injured youth, because he was too slow in retreating, he was about to be affected by the violent energy waves. Chu Luiyue was about to move, but Rong Xiao had already raised his hand. An extremely thin golden thread flew out and wrapped around the youth's ankle. Rong Xiao moved his wrist and instantly brought the young man back. Boom! That power swept over them. The entire ground where the young man had been standing had been lifted up. If that young man hadn't been able to dodge in time, this blow would have taken his life. Third brother. The youth, who thought that his third brother was dead for sure, was surprised and delighted when he saw this. He hurriedly changed direction and ran over. Second brother, the youth was still in a state of shock and looked at him in a daze. Just now. Someone had clearly saved him. He lowered his head subconsciously. A thin golden thread flashed past his ankle. The youth looked in the direction of the golden thread. Rong Xiao had already stopped. Thank you, no need. Before the youth could finish speaking, Rong Xiao had already spoken. The reason why he had intervened was because he did not want you, to feel guilty. After all, she was the one who had injured the youth. Although it was not a big deal, it was somewhat inappropriate for them to lose their lives because of this. Chu Luiyue sighed softly. This man, he always knew what she was thinking the best. However, Rong Xiao's action immediately attracted the attention of the people present. This strength, he was clearly much stronger than all of them. While they were still worried that they would be affected by the power of Tianlei and were running away in panic, this man actually had extra strength to save the youth. Hong'an, who was standing in the sky, saw this scene as well. His face was cold at first, then he clapped and laughed. Good, good, good. Looks like you're quite strong too. He did not pay much attention to this person before. He did not expect him to be so extraordinary. Looking at his young age, he reckoned that his talent and strength were more outstanding than expected. This was great. The more people like him there were, the more worthwhile this battle would be. Chu Luiyue heard Hong An's laughter and looked up. A cold light flashed in her eyes. Tianlei in the sky was gathering at an even faster speed. Then, 2 more Tianlei struck down in succession. Rong Xiao waved his sleeves and instantly set up a barrier in front of him. Ah! Tianlei landed. Someone was affected and let out a shrill cry. Chu Luiyue instinctively looked over. Suddenly, her gaze froze. The man lying on the ground was affected by the power. He was covered in wounds and did not look like he would survive. However, the blood on his body was quickly absorbed by the ground beneath him. The thick smell of blood filled the air. It was almost nauseating. Countless images flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind. Finally, it stopped at a familiar scene. That day at Peach Blossom Dock, didn't the people from Black Sword Sect use the same method to kill those cultivators? She suddenly realized something and looked at Rong Xiao. As expected. This is Black Demon Cave's territory. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2007. Following that, the heavenly lightning bolts bombarded every location on the mountain peak. In a short while, the originally handsome and tall mountain peak had become unrecognizable. Ravines crisscrossed, and forests collapsed. Shrill and panicked screams came from everywhere, and messy bloodstains covered the mountains and wilderness. Some people were lying on the ground, gradually losing their breath. However, their blood was still rapidly flowing out, soaking into the ground. Chu Luiyue looked again, and her pupils suddenly shrank. She saw that those people's bodies were shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. In an instant, Chu Luiyue finally understood something. This was to completely devour the last bit of power in their bodies. No wonder. No wonder the people of Black Demon Cave would hold a so-called trial here, using the Divine Ruins world as bait to deceive all these cultivators. Moreover, they wanted young geniuses. The essence and power seized like this was naturally the most abundant. She had long known that Black Demon Cave's cultivation method was very evil, but now that she saw it, it was 100 times more evil and sinister than she had expected. Not only that, even those people in the Peach Blossom Dock had probably suffered the same torture. She didn't know how long Black Demon Cave had been doing this, and she didn't know how many innocent people had died at their hands. Tianlei continued to fall, and the entire mountain peak was quickly covered by a white light. From the gaps in the flickering light, one could vaguely see the scene of people fleeing in panic. Painful wails could be heard incessantly. Hong'an looked down at this scene from above, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Hong'an, you're just going to act like this. The commotion here quickly attracted the attention of others. Someone flew up from a nearby mountain peak and looked over in their direction. Hong An crossed his arms and snorted. Among these people, there are a few who don't know what's good for them. The sooner we deal with them, the better. That person nodded in understanding, and then said with some regret. That's a pity. If you can let these people stay in Heavenly Ean Mountain for a month, you can get a lot of commission. Maybe, you can take the opportunity to refine a divine body. You have to know that such an opportunity doesn't come by often. If you miss this opportunity, who knows how long you'll have to wait for the next one. Upon hearing this, Hong An's face darkened. This person was right. In the entire sect, the only exit was the Cloud State City. Every once in a while, they would use the Divine Ruins world as an excuse to hold trials outside to attract all kinds of genius cultivators. Every time a trial was held, a different person would be in charge of it. They were the so-called gatekeepers. According to the rules, the cultivators who passed the trial would stay on Heavenly Ean Mountain for a month. And during this 1 month, they had set up a Xian formation on Lunar Mountain in advance, which would take the opportunity to devour these people's origin power. After the matter was completed, the gatekeeper would receive a portion of the power as a reward. The more power they devoured, the more benefits the gatekeeper would receive. One had to know that this energy was formed by gathering the origin power of the most talented cultivators. It was extremely pure and precious. If he could get such an opportunity, he might be able to save years or even decades of cultivation time. Who wouldn't want such a good thing? Every time, the entire sect would engage in an intense competition for this spot. Hong An had spent a lot of effort and thought to get this opportunity. Who knew that it would be wasted just like that? Once they entered the barrier, these people would have to bear the bombardment of Tianlai. Although this could further devour their power, in the process, they would lose a lot of their own power. And the gatekeeper would not be able to get a commission. But the most important thing was that his master valued this very much. If his master knew what he had done, he would definitely be punished. The only thing that made Hong An slightly relieved was that there were a few outstanding people in this group. With the existence of those people, perhaps they could make up for the previous losses and make his master less angry. Hong An held his breath. Such a good opportunity had been wasted. Not to mention a commission, he would thank the heavens if he could escape punishment this time. He didn't know what had happened on Heavenly Ean Mountain, right? This matter had to be reported as soon as possible. Thinking of this, Hong An said to that person, "Since you have nothing to do now, help me watch for a while. I'll go and report to my master about the situation on Heavenly Ean Mountain." That person had a good relationship with him, so he agreed. His figure moved and quickly came to Hong An's side. "Then go and come back quickly." Hong An nodded and was about to turn and leave. However, just as he took a step, he heard a strange sound coming from the mountain below. Almost at the same time, the people standing next to him gasped in shock. How could this be? Hong An hurriedly turned his head to look. How? His voice seemed to be suddenly cut off by something, and he stopped abruptly. On the mountain below, under the flickering lightning, a thin figure was faintly discernible. He held a sword in his hand and raised it high above his head. As for the lightning bolts that were descending, they were all swallowed up by the sword. Countless streams of light swam around the thick and deep sword, almost dyeing it into a dazzling snowy color. However, the terrifying power of Tianlai was indeed quickly annihilated by it. With the appearance of this person, the Tianlai that was bombarding indiscriminately was all stopped. Most of the cultivators were protected by this and evacuated to the side together. Except for the few people who unfortunately died because of the sudden incident, most of the remaining people were still alive. That person is... The light flickered, reflecting the soft short golden hair. The veins on Hong An's forehead throbbed. This person was the golden-haired youth from before. How could he be so strong? He doesn't know what's good for him. Hong-an cursed in a low voice. He wants to show off at this time, he's really tired of living. I'd like to see how long he can be arrogant. The power of Tianlei hadn't been fully displayed yet. As he spoke, several Tianlei in the sky gathered crazily again and then slashed down one after another. Boom! Boom! For a moment, the sky changed color. Hong-an's lips curled into a cold smile. They had prepared the array on this mountain long ago. Once it was activated, it could quickly summon Tianlei. It was impossible for this person to withstand it alone. However, the next scene completely froze Hong-an's smile on his face. Because facing the continuous bombardment of Tianlei, the youth didn't show any fear. Instead, he tightened his grip on the sword in his hand, raised it high, and then slashed it down fiercely. Cloud Sky Copper Sword. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2008. The heavy and majestic longsword suddenly fell. Wherever the sword chi went, the void was torn apart. The violent spatial turbulence raged and surged. Following that, a huge cracking sound came from the mountain. Boom! A ravine spread across the mountain. The huge mountain peak was instantly split into two by this sword. All the Tianlei power was affected by the impact and was swept away in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the mountain was split in half. Many cultivators stood on one side, while the violent Tianlei power gathered on the other side and raged wildly. Half of the mountain began to be destroyed and collapsed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Rumble. For a moment, the mountain rocks rolled down and dust flew. It was a complete mess all over the mountains and plains. Hong-an was stunned. The scene in front of him was so beyond his expectations that he stood there for a long time, unable to react. However, the person next to him suddenly realized something. No! Isn't he a stage 9 martial artist? How can he unleash such shocking power? Looking at his cultivation level, he was indeed not a god-level powerhouse. However, the strength he displayed now was already more powerful than many god-level martial artists. Hong-an's lips trembled. I don't know, back then, he felt that the golden-haired young man's talent and strength were very outstanding, so he gave him a second chance. Who would have thought that he would end up in such a big mess? Looking at the destroyed half of the mountain, Hong-an's blood froze, and he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. This time, it was really a big mess. If his master pursued this matter, he was afraid that, no, it's fine. It's definitely fine. Hong-an took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. Even if he's really a god-level powerhouse, he's definitely not a match for Tianlei. He did not believe that this person could really cause any trouble. As expected, the Tianlei in the sky seemed to have sensed something and quickly began to gather again. Chu Luiyue stood behind the crowd and looked at the thin and tall figure in front of her. She lightly sighed, and her lips curved up into a smile. That's amazing. After not seeing each other for such a long time, Little Boat's strength had already made an extremely shocking leap. Yes, he had yet to break through the threshold of becoming a high god. However, the power stored in his body was comparable to that of a high deity. Although the Cloud Sky Copper Sword was not a peak divine artifact, it was something that Chu Luiyue had spent a great deal of effort to refine. Swords had spirits. In Xiao Zhou's hands, this sword could unleash its greatest power. Everyone looked at the small boat gratefully. Clearly, his attack had saved many lives. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. He was the one who beat me to it. He clearly saw that the reason why Chang Wanzhou attacked them was because there was a Tianlei coming their way. To be precise, they were here for Chu Luiyue. At that time, he was about to make a move, but he did not expect Chang Wanzhou to beat him to it. Chu Luiyue glanced at him, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Why was he still jealous at a time like this? She had not seen Little Boat for a long time. Little Boat probably did not know her true strength, so he was in a hurry to make a move. His personality was straightforward and simple, and he did things decisively. If he thought of something, he would do it immediately. He had always been like that. At that moment, the sky was still dark. Several silver snake-like Tianlei appeared one after another in the thick clouds. The pressure was overwhelming. Everyone had just heaved a sigh of relief because they had escaped a calamity, but when they saw this scene, they all became worried again. Why is there no end to this Tianlei? Someone asked anxiously. If this continues, I'm afraid we'll be finished sooner or later. There was more than one person who was so worried. After all, they had never seen such a scene before. This golden-haired youth could help them for a while, but he could not help them forever. If they could not leave this place, then the final outcome might be the same. Little Boat gently exhaled, and a bright light flashed across his eyes. That voice just now, he heard it. That was a compliment. He knew. He originally wanted to turn back, but in the end, he endured it. Although they did not say anything, he knew that this was not a good time to acknowledge each other. For some unknown reason, she did not make a move. Even Rong Xiu, who was beside her, was deliberately suppressing his strength. Under such circumstances, naturally, he was the most suitable one to step forward. Little Boat was extremely smart, especially when it came to matters related to her. He always had extremely sharp senses and reaction. Therefore, he held the cloud sky copper sword in his hand tightly and looked up. Boom! Boom! When the Tianlei slashed down continuously, he flew out with his sword. He faced it head-on. Buzz! A sword chime resounded through heaven and earth. Immediately after, the Tianlei seemed to have been summoned by some kind of power, and they all changed their direction and headed toward the cloud sky copper sword. Hong'an and Rong Xiu were dumbfounded. Everyone on the mountain was shocked. Chu Luiyue blinked. So the cloud sky copper sword that she had refined back then was so powerful. But it was clearly not even a king divine artifact. That cloud sky copper sword has your aura. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly and suddenly spoke. She touched her chin. Could it be? Was it really because she had forcefully captured those Tianlei back then to refine the cloud sky copper sword that this sword still posed a certain threat to those Tianlei until now? This explanation seemed to make sense. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes. Those Tianlei are not afraid of that sword, but you. Digression, Tianlei, meow meow meow. I'll be back at 6 mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2009. Just as he finished speaking, there was a loud bang. The cloud sky copper sword had already devoured all the Tianlei. As Xiao Zhou's sword slashed down, the energy poured out like a torrent. However, the power of the heavenly lightning that was originally aimed at them had all turned into sword chi and was heading towards the collapsed half of the cliff. The mountain rocks turned into dust, and the space was torn apart crazily. The wind howled, and for a moment, the clouds and thunder moved. Even the boundary outside the mountain started to shake violently. It was about to break. Xiao Zhou's sword also dealt a heavy blow to Hong'an's heart. Looking at the half of the cliff that was almost completely destroyed, Hong'an's body stiffened, and he almost couldn't believe his eyes. He had never thought that a rank 9 warrior could actually unleash such strength. He asked himself, and even he himself might not be able to withstand the Tianlei. What the hell, this was really what the hell. Thinking about it carefully, this youth was not right from the start of the trial. Hong-an was filled with regret. If he knew that this youth could cause so much trouble, he would definitely not have let him in. But now that things had turned out like this, how should he clean up? Hong-an! Hong-an! The person beside him shouted a few times. What are you still standing there for? Quickly go and report to master. This anxious voice finally made Hong-an come back to his senses. Immediately, his face turned ghastly pale. He was all too clear that if this scene was seen by master, what kind of terrifying punishment would he face? One must know that there was a Xian formation that they had painstakingly set up on the mountain peak. Now, it was all destroyed. Now that things had turned out like this, it couldn't be concealed no matter what. Hong-an took a deep breath and reluctantly responded. Got it. You stay here and stabilize them first. I'll be back soon. However, before he could do anything, a figure had already flown over from afar. What's going on? The cold and solemn old voice was filled with majesty. The person who came was a black-robed old man with a head full of silver hair and wrinkles. One of his eyes was deeply sunken in, and his entire body emitted a cold and powerful pressure. When Hong-an and Xiao Zhou saw the person who came, they were shocked and hurriedly said, Greetings to Hall Master Do-min. Do-min ignored them. She walked past them and came to the front of the mountain. She quickly took in the scene in front of her. When he saw half of the collapsed mountain, his face turned even colder. Hong-an, is this what you've done? His voice sounded exceptionally hoarse and cold. First, you brought them back in advance, and then you allowed them to do such a thing. Hong-an, how many lives do you have to pay for the losses you've caused this time? Hong-an's legs went soft, and he shuddered, almost kneeling down directly. Hall Master Do-min, this, he didn't even know how to explain it. Do-min glanced at him coldly. The opportunity to become a gatekeeper is extremely rare. Do you know how much effort this old man put in to leave this spot for you this time? And this is how you repay me. Hong-an's face was as pale as a ghost. Not bad. The reason why he could get this opportunity this time was because of Do-min. He had never seen Do-min speak to him in such a tone. Facing Do-min's question, Hong-an couldn't say a word. What could he say? The whole thing seemed very strange from the beginning. Even that heavenly Een mountain and this powerful golden-haired youth, but even if he said these things, who would believe or care? Everyone only cared about the results. Trash. Do-min sneered. He was extremely disappointed with Hong-an. He was really blind before to have taken a fancy to such a thing. He was hoping that he could use this opportunity to temper his divine body, but he didn't expect that it would cause so much trouble. Do-min retracted his gaze. The most important thing now was to deal with the mess in front of him. Master is resting. No one is to disturb him. It would be best if this matter was resolved before Master wakes up. Otherwise, even he couldn't escape this calamity. Hong-an's back was already drenched in cold sweat. He could only nod when he heard this. Do-min took a step forward and raised his right hand. Then, a powerful aura transformed into a huge silver ball and flew out instantly. When the silver ball came into contact with the boundary outside the mountain, it immediately let out a buzzing sound. Then, the silver ball quickly dissipated and turned into countless streams of light, scattering in all directions and quickly merging into the boundary. The boundary that was originally on the verge of collapse stabilized with the support of this force. At such a young age, you have some ability. Do-min looked at the golden-haired youth standing on the mountain peak. Chang Wanzhou looked up and a cold light flickered in his eyes. Do-min frowned. The aura of this youth made him feel a trace of threat. He was just a rank 9 warrior, Do-min felt an inexplicable anger in his heart. His face was dark as he crossed his hands in front of him. Several streams of light gushed out in an instant. Almost at the same time, a strange sound suddenly came from under half of the collapsed mountain peak. Chu Luiyue looked over there and his eyes narrowed. Under the pile of rocks, streams of light flew out and intertwined with each other. Half a Xian formation was slowly emerging. At the same time, the mountain under their feet suddenly shook violently. Crack! A gully suddenly spread out from under their feet. Chu Luiyue lowered his eyes and his heart sank. Almost at the same time, Rongxiu grabbed her waist and with a tap of his foot, he soared into the sky. In the next moment, countless cracks crazily spread out like a spider web, covering half of the mountain peak completely. Since you like to split mountains so much, then I'll use this entire mountain to be buried with you. This way, it's not a wasted trip. Do-min's voice that was filled with threat and killing intent sounded like thunder in everyone's ears. He was a venerable god expert, and when he spoke, he deliberately increased the pressure. To the young cultivators on the mountain peak, it was undoubtedly a heavy blow. Immediately, there were people who couldn't withstand the pressure and fell to the ground, even vomiting blood. At this time, the Xian formation that was originally buried under the mountain finally revealed its original appearance, floating in mid-air and enveloping everyone. Although the Xian formation was slightly damaged due to Chang Wanzhou's attack, it was quickly repaired after Do-min took action. This Xian formation was like a cage, trapping everyone in this place. The entire mountain was suddenly in a mess. Everyone was filled with despair. This person's strength was even more powerful than Hong An. Even if everyone here joined forces, they wouldn't be a match for him. He Xylan cried softly. She was afraid and regretful. We're all going to die here today. If she knew that this was hell on earth, she wouldn't have come even if she was beaten to death. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Be quiet. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2010. Although her voice was soft, it carried an unquestionable pressure. He Xylan immediately stopped talking. Her eyes were red as she sobbed and looked at her. Because of what happened before, she no longer dared to be presumptuous in front of Chu Luiyue. So when she heard this, she subconsciously held it in. He Ziji patted her back gently. Seeing that Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu didn't seem to be as panicked and fearful as the others, his uneasy heart gradually calmed down. These two people seemed to have an inexplicable power that made people feel at ease. He couldn't tell what was going on, but he felt that following them seemed to. Things weren't that bad. But in this situation, what should he do to escape? The Xian formation began to descend slowly. Every time it got closer, the terrifying pressure and unbridled power above made everyone tremble in fear. Probably realizing that relying on Tianlei's attack wouldn't be able to finish them off easily, Do-min directly used his killing move. Chang Wanzhou raised his head slightly and stared at the approaching Xian formation. There seemed to be endless waves surging in his eyes. This aura, he held the cloud sky copper sword tightly, tapped his toes, and went straight for the Xian formation. Boom! The power of both sides collided fiercely. Following this shocking explosion, the unbridled power was like a torrent that surged in all directions. The remaining mountain peak that had already been split into pieces finally collapsed completely. For a moment, light flashed. Chang Wanzhou's figure was instantly engulfed by this light. Do-min's lips curled into a cold smile. That eye that was still intact flickered with a cold and bloodthirsty light. You don't know what's good for you. Hongyan and Rongxiu, who were standing behind him, heaved a sigh of relief when they saw this scene. Hongyan hurriedly said, "You're a venerable god expert. How can a mere rank 9 warrior be your opponent? With just one move, you can. Before he could finish his sentence, his expression suddenly changed. The other person also instantly realized something and couldn't help but exclaim in shock. How can this be? He's actually not dead. Crack. The sound of something shattering could be heard clearly. This time, even Do Min's expression changed. Impossible. A crack had actually appeared on the huge Xian formation. Voila! Before they could react, the profound formation had actually shattered into pieces. Countless streams of light with astonishing power scattered in all directions. The enchantment outside the mountain instantly shattered. Down below, everyone's expression changed, and they all retreated. A figure flew out from within. He fell heavily onto the ruins. Bang! A muffled sound was heard. Smoke and dust rose in all directions. Chang Wanzhou's body trembled and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His aura instantly weakened. He was standing closest to the Xian formation, so he received the greatest impact. This time, he was almost half dead. Chu Liuyue's heart tightened. He was about to make a move but was stopped by Rongxiu. Wait. Chu Liyue was anxious. He couldn't just watch as Xiao Zhou was beaten to death, right? Just as she was about to say something, she noticed that Rongxiu was frowning and looking in a certain direction. Her heart skipped a beat, and she followed his gaze. In the distance, a powerful and unparalleled pressure suddenly descended. Her heart seemed to be clenched tightly by something. This aura, so noisy. A hoarse and low voice seemed to have passed through a long time and space and came from afar. The voice was calm and casual, but it carried supreme majesty. Mo Shiqian. He was actually here. Digression, Kawanzhong, 7 o'clock. Sorry for the kissing. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2011. So far, Chu Liyue had never really seen Mo Shiqian. Although they had confronted each other several times, Mo Shiqian had never shown his face. Chu Liyue even heard his name from Rongxiu. However, the moment she heard this voice, Chu Liyue knew, it must be him. Chu Liyue held her breath, her heart beating violently, and blood seemed to flow under her eardrums. Previously, she had already guessed that this was the territory of the Black Demon Cave, but she never thought that Mo Shiqian would be here too. In that case, wasn't this the headquarters of the Black Demon Cave? So they were hiding here. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows, revealing a look of realization. No wonder he had sent people to investigate before, but there had been no results. Mo Shiqian was really capable. He had directly left the Divine Ruins world and came here. What a good idea. Hearing this, Chu Liyue instantly understood Rongxiu's meaning and frowned slightly. So that was it. A few years ago, the Black Demon Caves suddenly disappeared without a trace, as if they had disappeared from the Divine Ruins world. Who knew? They were actually hiding outside the Divine Ruins world. In this world, who would have thought that they would make such a choice? Moreover, although they were outside the Divine Ruins world, this place was close to the Gate Realm, and the energy of heaven and earth was abundant. It was extremely suitable for cultivation, no different from the Divine Ruins world. If she had not come here today, who knew when she would have realized this? Understanding this, Chu Liyue's mind raced. She knew very well that Mo Shiqian wanted to snatch her zither score. Previously, she had always thought that the Black Demon Cave had chosen to retreat because Rongxiu had personally come and severely injured them. They had made this decision in order to avoid the sharp edge and recuperate. But now, she vaguely felt that this guess seemed to be somewhat wrong. Greetings, Sect Master. On the other side, when Hongen and the others heard this voice, their expressions changed and they hurriedly bowed. Suddenly, the world fell silent. All the noise seemed to have dissipated at this moment. The berserk energy that had been wreaking havoc everywhere stopped flowing. The vast space seemed to be frozen in place. Chu Luiyue could only hear the sound of his heart beating violently. Mo Shiqian's strength had obviously become more unfathomable. Finally, a cloud of black mist condensed in the air. A tall and straight figure stood there, faintly discernible like a ghost. Chu Luiyue held his breath. That person, it must be Mo Shiqian. However, in that instant just now, she actually didn't see clearly how he had appeared. In all directions, the void was calm, as if it had frozen. The moment his figure appeared, the surrounding heaven and earth energy and space did not fluctuate at all. There was still a considerable distance between them. However, Chu Luiyue still felt as if a huge rock was pressing down on her chest, making it hard for her to breathe. This person's strength could only be described as terrifying. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue felt an extremely dangerous gaze fall on him. Her hair immediately stood on end. It had been a long time since she felt like she was walking between life and death. At this moment, a warm and broad palm slowly grasped her hand. The warmth of the iron kept coming from above. A faint cold fragrance assaulted her, almost surrounding her. Rong Xiao, he was still here. She looked up. The two of them looked at each other. Rong Xiao smiled slightly and gave her a reassuring look. Chu Luiyue's heart instantly calmed down. No matter what danger she encountered or what situation she was in, he would always be by her side to protect her. Chu Luiyue blinked gently. That gaze finally moved away from her. Mo Shiqian frowned slightly. Could it be that moment just now was an illusion? Putting those thoughts away, he looked up again and gazed ahead. I haven't been out for a while. I didn't expect you to give me such a big gift. He spoke slowly, his voice calm and emotionless. However, in the ears of Hongen and the rest, these words were no different from a life and death warning. Domin took a deep breath and said, "It's all because of our incompetence to disturb Sect Master. Please punish us." In the end, the worst situation had occurred. But at this time, there was no other way. Life and death were all in the hands of Master. Mo Shiqian ignored him and only raised his hand. Of course, when he did this, his hand was still wrapped in a layer of black fog. No one could see anything clearly. Then, Chang Wanzhou's body was pulled up by this shocking force. At this moment, a few of his ribs were broken and he had suffered some internal injuries. His entire body was covered in blood and dust, and he looked extremely miserable. He was on the verge of death and looked like he was about to die at any moment. However, he still held the Cloud Sky Copper sword tightly in his hand. Ranked 9 warrior. Mo Shiqian's voice suddenly carried a hint of a smile. Do-min, you're getting more and more promising. Do-min's face was pale. As a god, after attacking, his move was actually broken by a rank 9 warrior. If word got out, even he himself would feel embarrassed. He wanted to defend himself, but when he thought about how this person hated these things the most, he gave up in the end. He just stood there trembling in fear, waiting for the final result. Chang Wanzhou's body seemed to be supported by an invisible force as he floated quietly in the air. Mo Shiqian looked at him carefully. Your talent is not bad. Suddenly, his voice paused. He seemed to have discovered something as his fingers moved slightly. At this moment, Chang Wanzhou finally opened his eyes. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2012. His eyes were filled with wariness. His entire body was tense as if he was prepared to attack at any moment. However, such actions and threats were not worth mentioning in Mo Shurqian's eyes. He would not take a rank 9 warrior seriously. Even if this young man forcefully withstood Do Min's attack, it was just a small matter in Mo Shurqian's eyes. He raised his wrist gently. A strong force assaulted him. Chang Wanzhou's elbow went numb and he involuntarily let go. The cloud sky copper sword flew forward. Chang Wanzhou's expression immediately turned stern. Just as he opened his mouth, he felt as if an invisible hand was strangling his neck. His voice stopped abruptly, and his originally pale face quickly flushed red. The difference in strength between the two of them was too great. Furthermore, he was injured and could not fight against the other party at all. Hence, he could only watch as the cloud sky copper sword landed in Mo Shurqian's hands. Everyone was silent. The world was so cold and solemn that it seemed to have been completely frozen. Countless pairs of eyes looked at Mo Shurqian. Shock, reverence, fear, all sorts of emotions filled everyone's hearts. That terrifying oppressive might made it so that they couldn't even speak a single word. Seeing Mo Shurqian's actions, Chu Luo slowly clenched his fists. This aura is very familiar. Mo Shurqian weighed the cloud sky copper sword. After looking at it repeatedly, he confirmed his guess. He looked up at Chang Wanzhou again. You're her man. This was not a question, but a statement. He did not say who this sheath was. However, the meaning of his words could not be more obvious. Chang Wanzhou pursed his lips tightly and did not say anything. However, Mo Shurqian clearly did not need his answer. He would definitely not be wrong about this person's aura. Interesting. Indeed, like master, like servant. Mo Shurqian laughed, but there was no smile in his words. Chu Luo was not afraid of death, and so was this young man. He actually barged in here. Who let him in? Mo Shurqian suddenly asked. Hong An's legs turned to jelly and he looked at Do Min for help. At this time, he would only have a chance of survival if Do Min spoke up for him. However, at this moment, Do Min suddenly turned around and looked at him with furrowed brows. What are you waiting for? Didn't you hear the sect leader's question? Hong An was stunned, as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Do Min had already turned around and bowed. Replying to sect master, Hong An is fully in charge of this trial. Hong An's mind went blank. Do Min continued to speak with a pained and regretful expression. Back then, it was this subordinate's fault for choosing him. I didn't expect him to do such a thing. He deserved to be killed. This subordinate did not investigate properly. It is also a dereliction of duty. Sect leader, please punish me. His words sounded like he was asking for forgiveness, but in fact, he was pushing all the blame to Hong An. Do Min knew very well that he would definitely not be able to escape safely this time with such a big commotion. But at the very least, he had to protect his own life. As for Hong An, at this time, he could not even protect himself. How could he care about him? Hong An did not expect that Do Min, who had always favored him, would not leave him any leeway at this critical moment. He even pushed him behind his back. Did he think that he would not die quickly enough? For a moment, Hong An was also enraged. He immediately said, Sect leader, please investigate. This subordinate is really wronged in this matter. This subordinate, you did very well. Mo Shurqian was impatient to listen to their excuses, so he interrupted Hong An. Although he had been resting earlier, he was aware of everything that had happened. He was also very clear about what they were planning in their hearts. Now, he did not have the time to deal with this. Hong An was stunned. The two people beside him were also shocked. What did the sect leader say just now? He said, he did, very well. Hong'an almost thought that he was hallucinating. He looked up in disbelief and glanced at Imo Shiqian. However, with just a glance, he sensed a warning and hurriedly lowered his head. It's a felony to bring them back in advance. However, this time, it's considered a crime. Imo Shiqian's meaning was very clear. It was because of this golden-haired youth that he did not intend to pursue Hong'an's mistake. Hong'an was shocked and confused, but more than that, he was happy to have survived a disaster. According to the sect leader, he would not die. In fact, he might not even be punished. And all this was because he brought back the golden-haired youth. Do Min was embarrassed. Imo Shiqian's words were undoubtedly like a slap to his face. But, what was the background of that golden-haired youth that the sect leader valued him so much? They were not the only ones. At this moment, almost everyone had the same question in their hearts. This golden-haired youth's talent and strength were not bad, but it did not seem to be to an exaggerated extent. Moreover, he had tried to fight Imo Shiqian just now. Such a person usually only had a dead end. What did he have that Imo Shiqian valued? Could it be that sword? Imo Shiqian put away the sword and sized up Chang Wanzhou again. Although this cloud sky copper sword was not a top-grade divine artifact, it was obvious that a lot of effort had been put into it. Chu Luiyue was willing to give this sword to him. It could be seen that this golden-haired youth had a close relationship with her. She can be said to be in the limelight now, Imo Shiqian muttered thoughtfully and chuckled. If she knows that you are in my hands, I wonder how she will react. She would not be in a good mood. Chang Wanzhou stared at the figure in front of him. Due to the black fog, he could not see the other party's appearance clearly. He could only see the rough outline of the figure. He knew that the other party was extremely strong. He had not felt such a dangerous aura for a long time. Imo Shiqian asked. What's your name? Chang Wanzhou did not speak. Imo Shiqian smiled. Do you think I can't do anything to you like this? This golden-haired youth's appearance was extremely eye-catching. It was not difficult to find out his identity after asking around. Imo Shiqian's gaze landed on the crowd below. That sharp and cold gaze was like a blade that cut across their bodies. Some people's legs went weak and they could barely stand. Whoever can tell me this person's name and background, I will reward you handsomely. Imo Shiqian said. Everyone was dead silent. No one answered. Not to mention that they did not know, even if they did, they could not say it out loud. Chang Wanzhou had just saved their lives. Imo Shiqian's expression darkened as he smiled faintly. Oh. You don't want to say it. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.